IT coordinator, and I've done a lot with developmental disabilities for over 20 something years. We'll leave it at that. So a little bit about LD37. LD37 is the learning domain that focuses on teaching cadets about working with people with disabilities. They have different domains that they have to go through. My focus is really when I go into a police academy, this is what I teach. I go in and I do 8 hours of just working with them on developmental disabilities. And then I have a co-presenter that does the mental health piece. So what it takes to be an academy instructor, you do have to go through a certification. There are times when I bring in, just people with lived experience that can talk about what it's like. There's the struggles that they might face on a daily basis, and even just like all the wonderful things that they're able to do. Definitely, that piece is important. Our cadets need to be able to see the population they're going to be working with. And then, like I said, I'm also I'm an academy instructor with an IDI, a level 3. And so it does take a little bit of time to go through the process of becoming an instructor and going through those certifications. So what I really wanted to focus on today was kind of giving you guys a highlight of what Learning Domain 37 is. So again, cadets have to go through a series of trainings that were, just domains that they have to learn in order to become police officers. One of the things that we look at with this learning domain is we look at disability law. So we talk about the Americans with Disabilities Act. We talk about accommodations. We talk about access, what access would look like if someone's in a wheelchair and they may need to be arrested, or they may need to be taken in because of a crisis situation. We talk about interactions with people with disabilities. We talk about the Lanterman Act and how it's specific to California. We talk about developmental disabilities. We go into what an intellectual disability is. We go into cerebral palsy, common interactions with law enforcement with each population. We talk about autism, epilepsy. And then if you see here, I put right here, missing 5th category. And it's one of the categories that I think is essential to be talked about. If you look at chapter 2, really they're focusing on intellectual disabilities, cerebral palsy, autism, and epilepsy. And then they say references and referrals. But we're missing that 5th category. And I want to give you guys a little bit of information on what 5th category is, because I think it's probably the category that would have the most interaction with law enforcement. Also, another key thing that I think is important and is missing is sensory implications to crisis response. The sensory needs of all of our sensory needs are important. I think we don't pay attention to our sensory needs because we've just learned to deal with it. We don't have, a lot of us don't have sensory deficits. We're just able to deal with our sensory needs and not pay any attention to it. Whereas some people with those sensory deficits, it's very important that officers be aware of those implications. So those are the 2 parts that I think are important and are missing in LD37. The other part that we talk about is neurological disorders, blindness, visual impairments, deaf and hard of hearing. And then we talk about additional laws that protect people with disabilities and physical disabilities. So we go into Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act. We go into Rosa's Law. We talk about service dogs. We talk about emotional support dogs. So we go into all these other areas that you don't really see here, but when you look at the actual workbook, it does have some of those components. I will tell you, the one component that it doesn't have is that 5th category piece or the sensory implications piece, which is crucial. Under Learning Domain 37, and this is a 15-hour basically session, we're also going to be talking about mental illness. You know, they're gonna learn about the different types of mental illnesses, the different types of field contact. They're gonna learn about Lanterman-Petra Short Act. So there's a lot that they have to learn about in 15 hours. The other component too, and I put up here dementia, Alzheimer's, right? That falls under neurological. However, we also need to take into consideration that our population, specifically adults with Down syndrome, tend to, and later in life, develop dementia symptoms, Alzheimer's. And so even, you know, teaching them about that co-occurring piece is crucial. For me, I think the most, I teach this. So I always talk about fifth category, no matter what. I emphasize fifth category. I emphasize sensory implications. I emphasize the co-occurring piece, which is super important. But I'm not sure what other instructors are emphasizing when they're teaching LD 37. So this is why I think it's important that those two components be part of this learning domain. So again, you know, the fifth category is the one that I'm like really passionate about as far as really making sure that we incorporate this, because the fifth category, it's a disabling condition that is closely related to someone who has an intellectual disability or requires similar treatment. Oftentimes, this population goes undiagnosed. Oftentimes, this population, you may not see the gaps when they're really young, but as they're getting older, those gaps get wider. And the gaps that I'm talking about are gaps like judgment. And that one is definitely going to have implications when it comes to law enforcement. They can be easily influenced. And there's more to this that I'll talk a little bit more about. The other thing is the sensory implications when it comes to law enforcement response. I think for the most part, everybody believes that we have five senses, when in reality we have eight, and those three other senses are very critical to a person's life. So I'll talk a little bit about that and kind of what I'm going to be just showing you guys, because I know some of you guys were saying you would love to see some of these presentations, right? Some of the stuff that is being taught. I'm going to give you guys a glimpse of what I teach. And again, everybody's curriculum is a little bit different. We do have this learning domain guideline, and we go based on that, but also I know I focus on these categories because I see them as an area that really needs to be highlighted. So I talk about our eight senses and how our eight senses respond to sensory overload. I talk about the co-occurring mental health disorders. I mean, we have a lot of people that we really started to see the need for mental health with people with intellectual developmental disabilities. We really started to see it during the pandemic, because that's when we really started to see a lot of kids struggling, young adults struggling. I mean, we were all struggling. So even talking about that piece. So a little bit more about fifth category. Again, I said this category is very similar to someone who requires services, like someone with an intellectual disability. So, frequently their IQ falls under 70 to 74, which is borderline. And a lot of times, just with that IQ alone, they might not be eligible for a regional center. So we need to be able to show three other areas of substantial disability. So this is where this population will sometimes get lost, because those other three areas you may not see them at 8 years old, at 9 years old. You may start really seeing those areas at 12, 13, 15, even as they get older. So that's the piece that I think is really missing. And, really a lot of this population ends up identified once they've been incarcerated. because that's when they're actually, maybe uh, the jail staff have noticed that there might be something more with this population. They might have substantial deficits in major life activities. So it really, and they relate to their cognitive impairments. So some characteristics, and what I'm talking about here is stuff that I'm teaching law enforcement. When I teach this at CIT programs, I also go into this at for the LD37 at the police academies. So I talk about this fifth category criteria. They're going to have a lot of poor judgment. They're going to fail to consider the consequences of their actions. A lot of poor executive functioning issues. They lack of initiative, and then also they're going to be very slow and inappropriate to respond. So if you think about all of this and this population having police interaction, what could that look like? So it's very important to address this at not only at the academy level but also with the CIT programs. So a little bit more insight on fifth category. Think of this population as someone who's going to require long-term habilitative services. Again, most of the time, this population has not been diagnosed. They're not with regional center. However, like I said, those gaps get wider, and then families start seeing that, they've been in special education all this time. They're still not learning to read. They seem to have more judgment issues. They seem to be getting into more trouble. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that maybe they're undiagnosed or they have not received some of the services through regional center. So some of the challenging behaviors that you're going to see with this population is disinhibition. A lot of this population, you'll find that are victims of human trafficking, have been victimized, don't understand when they're being taken advantage of. They're easily influenced, they're gullible, and they're impulsive. The other thing that I think is important that's missing on LD37, and I'll say too, on a lot of the CIT the CIT training that goes on, is the developmental disability systems and their services, the safety net services. People don't understand those safety net services. So it's not just regional center providing service coordination. It's looking at services like preventative support services, preventative crisis services. If our population receives preventative crisis services, that might lead to less 911 calls when that person is in crisis. So even understanding those services is critical, and teaching law enforcement about this, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to respond when someone is in crisis. Sometimes law enforcement or our crisis intervention teams will know more about the services and the resources than the families do. So it's important to give them all that information, not just call the regional center, really understand what goes beyond the regional center. What can regional center really provide? Teaching about the mobile crisis services, not only to law enforcement, but also to families. I think the biggest disconnect is not including the community. The community isn't aware of these services. So it's crucial that we include them. Talking about residential services, understanding that there's different levels of residential services. And sometimes, a person may need to be placed in a residential type program because maybe their behaviors are just not, families may not be able to be able to provide the appropriate supports in their setting. So just understanding all of this. And I put this as missing portions under LD37 and CIT, just because you'll see a lot of the same stuff. Like, what I'm teaching for my LD37 class, I take pieces of that to teach for my CIT classes. Understanding again some more of the crisis services, some of the step down services, the wraparound services, and really getting to the point where families are receiving the rights and supports and services to alleviate that 911 calls, to not have to make that 911 call. So common triggers and causes. So I talked a little bit about this. We go into more details when I'm teaching. Not only do we talk about intellectual disabilities, we talk about the communication aspect of it. How would you communicate with someone who's nonverbal and is in a crisis? You know, what could we do to ensure that it's a safe interaction? What do you need to learn as law enforcement, as first responders, as crisis intervention teams, because sometimes the teams respond together? What do you need to know? You know, what kind of interactions are you already having? If you're having to respond to the same home over and over again, where are we lacking services? Why are we lacking services? What can we do to support this? And that's where a good crisis intervention team comes into play. And I'll talk about crisis intervention teams at the CIT international level. Um, let's see. Okay, so I've been, you know, you guys have heard about CIT. You've heard a little bit about LD37. I kind of wanted to put as much information out there for you guys to kind of, you know, get a glimpse of what's going on right now in California. I'll tell you that as within the last 2 months, I have trained 214 police officers within the last 2 months all over California, from Morgan Hill to Salinas to Bakersfield. And so a lot of the training that we're doing is that we're teaching them about the sensory implications to crisis response through their 40-hour training. We teach about what autism is, what intellectual disabilities are, what cerebral palsy is. We go into the details of the types of services that might be beneficial to this person, so that so that the officers aren't having to respond to these calls over and over again. But I think the critical piece, so we've gone from LD37, now we're going to go into CIT. Once they've become officers, what happens next? What kind of training is happening? Are they just out on the streets? You know, I think that's a lot of great questions to have. Are they continuing to be educated? What does that education look like? CIT International put out the best practices guide on how to respond to crisis, to someone who's in crisis. And CIT International has an annual conference. Earlier this year, we had it in Indianapolis. One of the things that, because CIT is such an important, not only movement, but program, in August, we were able to present to a delegation from Ukraine about what crisis response should look like. And as we know, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They're experiencing a lot of crisis, and they wanted to know, how could we best respond to our population? So we were able to present to them on what the philosophy, the programming of what CIT looks like. And our next conference is in August. So I just put that on there. But what is CIT? So CIT is a community-based program that improves community responses to behavioral health needs. I'll tell you, I've been such a strong advocate about changing some of the wording, because the wording was always mental health, mental health. And I get it. When CIT first started, it started because of NAMI. The strong advocacy that NAMI had made CIT happen, and it was mental health related. But as we're evolving, CIT International is also evolving and saying, hey, we need to be looking at the behavioral health needs of everyone, because it's not just mental health. And we see it now with our population, right? With people with intellectual developmental disabilities. One of the key factors with CIT is, when I say CIT, about 80% of the people think training. It's not just training. Training is a component of a CIT program. The CIT program should have a great partnership and stakeholders. And those stakeholders should include people with lived experience. You know, this programming is a community-based program that should involve the community. People with lived experience, advocates, you know, advocates for people with mental health needs, advocates for people with developmental disabilities. We really need to be included in these stakeholder partnerships. Unfortunately, not every CIT program um, basically follows this piece. It's either just a law enforcement program or a mental health program. But in reality, it should be a community-based program with all the key stakeholders, the people that are going to come in and say, hey, this is what our community needs. So the goals of it, again, it's really to improve safety during law enforcement encounters. And increase connections. That's where that stakeholder group comes into play. How do we increase connections? If we're part of that stakeholder group, then we're saying, hey, I'm with an agency that provides services to people with developmental disabilities. This is how we can help when you're having to respond to our clients. If they're lacking housing, we need to have housing experts there. So it really is crucial that it be part of a community. The other thing that CIT International wants to look at or really focuses on is using law enforcement strategically. You know, not every call needs to lead to a law enforcement encounter. So even being able to understand that, hey, when that you guys were talking earlier about dispatcher training. Dispatcher training is essential. It should be the bedrock of every type of training that's happening for law enforcement. Because dispatchers are going to get that call and they're the ones that can redirect and say, hey, you know what, maybe this isn't something that we need to send our officers for. Maybe we can redirect to 988 or another source that might be able to provide that service that would lead to less officer interactions. Obviously, reducing the trauma, this is going to reduce the trauma that people experience during a behavioral health crisis. We're not saying that law enforcement should not be involved. Law enforcement is a critical piece to CIT. It is the most important piece. However, it's just being able to understand where these calls need to be rerouted to. And then remembering that this is a voluntary program. I think, one of the things, and a lot of states are going this way, a lot of states are saying, hey, let's train all our officers on CIT. And great, it's a great thing. Let's give them all that 40-hour training. They need to know what they're dealing with out on the streets, right? They need to know about those crisis calls. However, not every person needs to be a CIT officer, right? Meaning, really, it's a voluntary program, or at least that's what CIT International, our philosophy, our best practices looks like, right? It doesn't mean that it's perfect. It's a best practice guide. That's what it is, right? So not only are our officers going to receive the 40-hour training, but let's look when we're doing this 40-hour training, let's identify those officers that we see could really be crucial for the CIT team. Could be identified as, hey, this officer not only went through the 40-hour training, but I see that this is something of a passion for them. Why not identify them and say, you will be our CIT officer? I think one of the biggest misconception is that CIT International says that we're only supposed to train 20 to 25% of the officers. That's not the case. It really is about what the community needs are. If the community needs to train all officers, that's fine. It's just remembering that, we need to identify those officers that would be a good fit to respond to our population that's in crisis. Who should be involved? NAMI, behavioral health, developmental disabilities agencies. And when I mean who should be involved is who should be involved at that stakeholder meeting, at that meeting that's going to really say, hey guys, this is how we should be responding to our community. Regional center, forensic specialists. I know Teresa Anderson spoke a lot about forensic specialists at the last session, and I'm with her. We need to have the forensic specialists be part of this stakeholder group because they're the ones that are already involved because their clients have gone through the judicial system already. And so more than likely, they've had a few incidents of crisis. So those people are an important piece. Crisis services, crisis prevention services like the START program. Obviously, law enforcement needs to be there, veteran services, and their battle buddies, right? Because they're the ones that really understand what they need. Homeless agencies, youth services, victim services, hospitals, and 988. We can't forget about 988. And also 988 needs to have the training, specific training on developmental disabilities. School districts, resources, and clergy and animal services, because how many of our clients have you know service animals, and if they're in crisis, we need to know what we're going to do with that service animal when that person's in crisis. The other one, and I totally forgot to put it on here, but dispatchers, they need to be part of this team. The whole focus of having this stakeholder thing, this stakeholder team, is really understanding what each person's role would be, right? So if we have a developmental disabilities a person as part of the stakeholder team, then that's who we rely on. Hey, we keep getting a call for this group home, and it's this type of a call. What can we do to make this, what does this person need? What kind of supports, so that those calls, that there's a reduction in those calls. You can create memorandums of understanding with that stakeholder group to kind of figure out what each of their job is going to be as part of the CIT committee or CIT team. And then I kind of wanted to give you guys a little sample of that 40-hour curriculum. I'll tell you this. One of the things that is always asked is, how do I become an instructor for a CIT program? Really, a lot of the recruitment comes from the steering committee, which is why you want to be part of that steering committee, right? You want to say, hey, I can lend you a couple of my staff to come in and teach about victimization, or teach about how medication, how medication affects behavior. I mean, a lot of this, a lot of the instructors are doing it basically for free. We're coming in, and we hope to God that our agency allows us to do this, right? But a lot of this is being done as part of that steering committee, where we're actually lending our staff to be able to do some of this trainings. On average, we have about 50 instructors that are available to us to do the 40-hour session. We recruit through the steering committee. It's usually behavioral health, law enforcement, advocacy, people with lived experience, because we need those people. They need to tell us, hey, this is how you need to be responding to us. A lot of questions about how they're funded. A lot of times they're not funded. They're just required to do this. A lot of times they, that's why some programs will only do 8-hour sessions, because they're just not there yet, right? So they're always looking for funding. County Behavioral Health can provide funding, SAMHSA grants, COPS grants, Department of Justice grants, propositions. So, we want more and more training, but we also need to consider that there has to be some type of funding involved with it, because it really can be overwhelming for law enforcement agencies and all the other agencies that are involved in this. So then a little bit on the training blocks, right? What we want them to know is the knowledge of mental health, the knowledge of risk assessment, substance abuse, and co-occurring diagnosis, developmental disabilities, the special populations, the children and adolescents, different areas. And when we're talking about special populations, this is why we also need school police involved, because there's a lot of kids that are experiencing crisis in schools. Some of the building the empathy piece, there's an exercise called Hearing Voices, which really puts the officer in a position where they're hearing voices. It puts them, it helps them understand what that schizoaffective disorder might look like. That's why we bring in people with lived experience, so that they can talk about what they're experiencing. And then we look at de-escalation, scenario-based training, coaching and feedback, and then we do a graduation. That's what the 40-hour piece looks like. If you look at and this is the CIT, the national curriculum, this is what we have provided, right, as a guidance. If you look at Wednesdays, it's autism and developmental disabilities. If you look at this 8 to 8:30, do you really think we're going to have enough time to provide all that information? No, we don't. So you really want to try to expand that. And that's why, as part of that steering committee, you can have that influence. You know, a lot of times when a CIT program calls me for the first time, they're like, hey, can you come in and do an autism training? And I'm like, okay, we'll start with an autism training, but we need to expand that. It's not just autism, it's developmental disabilities, it's fifth category, it's all these things that we need to be talking about. But this is just a sample. Officer wellness, that has to be, that has to be paramount. You cannot do this without having a strong officer wellness component. Officers need to be okay in order to respond to those that are in crisis. And then CIT International, we encourage each program to develop their own curriculum. I mean, we give them a guide, but really it's your community. So you should be able to figure out what would work in your community and what you need to add. And if that means adding a 4-hour session just on developmental disabilities because you're getting an increase in calls in that area, then that's what you should be doing. But that's where we come in as stakeholders. So then being a CIT instructor, and I'll just give you guys a quick, this is what I teach. I go into cerebral palsy if they give me enough time, because it goes back to, remember, it's 40 hours and you guys saw this thing tells you everything they're supposed to kind of hit. And so in 40 hours, like I'm lucky if I get 4 hours, I'm really lucky, which is rare, but I do. But I teach about cerebral palsy, epilepsy, autism, IDD. So I teach about all the same thing that I would teach with LD37. But with them, I go into the social interactions, nonverbal, verbal communication, behavioral manifestations, what they look like, common law enforcement interactions. I go into wandering. That's a key one for us. And under, let's see, the AB 2541, that's going to be, that's really good because we need to increase that. Self-injurious behaviors towards others, and then the 8 senses. So then I go into the senses and how they're so important, right? I mean, we know the 5, everybody knows the 5, but even proprioception, our awareness of body and space, the strength needed to complete actions, all of that piece is super important, especially during a crisis, right? During a crisis, you might see someone who is rocking even more, right? Who might have more of that sensory or stimming type behaviors because maybe they need more of that proprioception. The vestibular, which is the sense of balance and their spatial orientation. And then the interoception. So even understanding when we're hungry, understanding when we're cold, understanding when we're hot. A lot of our population has these areas of need. And so, think of someone who may not feel pain because their body is not telling them you should be in pain. If they're in an accident, an officer would not be able to, to tell if someone is injured if the person doesn't tell them, right? Because they're not feeling it. So, with the vestibular disorder, it can actually cause challenges during sobriety tests because, they have, when interacting with someone who has vestibular disorders, often there's, the senses are not an important part of law enforcement training, but that's a key piece. And then with proprioception disorders, someone might face challenges understanding where their body is in space and may not be aware of how close they are to, let's say, an officer. You don't want to get too close to an officer, right? And again, when they're in a crisis, that leads to them, having more of those sensory regulation type behaviors that can look aggressive to an officer. So then I talk about overstimulation and how sensory or overload can affect us and can actually trigger some behavior manifestations. And we talk about how sensory dysregulation really affects your mood, your behavior, your energy, and your attention. And then we talk about what a tantrum is versus a meltdown, really helping them understand that they're two different things, and that when someone is in this state of mind, because they might be completely overwhelmed, they're not going to be able to react the way you want them to react. Then I talk about the fight, flight, and how it affects someone. Often if someone is trying to self-calm, right, they'll say, I'm okay. They'll say, I'm okay, I'm okay. And that might look odd to an officer. So even them understanding that, sometimes people, that's how they're soothing themselves, how they're actually dealing with that sensory dysfunction. And so I talk about the behavioral regulation and how that impacts as well. And then I talk about the tips for responders, what site can, how our site can be overwhelmed. So even reducing the lights, the sounds, kind of the same stuff that, and this will be probably taught in every of the classes, because it's something, it's just tips that we always give officers. In every one of my class, I always bring fidget toys, because even the officers need them sometimes, right? It's a good calming, and honestly, I feel like it engages my class more. But even having, it would be so cool if every police officer carried a little sensory kit with them, because everybody needs it. It could even be just to calm your nerves, and then the balance, understanding that vestibular processing, how it impacts your balance, and then your body awareness. And then I think the critical piece that is missing is the community engagement and presentations. We need to let our community know that we have officers that are trained, that we have really good, CIT programs that can respond with a clinician, when they're having to make that 911 call. Ask, do you have a crisis intervention team? Do you have a co-responder? Do you have someone who can respond with law enforcement? Because my kid is in crisis, and here's the reasons why they're in crisis. I always tell families, give as much information as possible, and use your words wisely. I think, when we say someone's aggressive to law enforcement, they're going to come in thinking someone is being aggressive, right? When in reality, we're trying to say, hey, my child who might have a disability, who has some sensory needs, may become, a little bit, may have some behaviors that might look aggressive, but, this is what's happening. Then that response might be completely different. Providing that information on communication needs, and then the sensory needs of the person. And again, you're relaying this to a dispatcher, so you want to make sure you provide as much as possible. But in essence, I just kind of wanted to give you guys a little bit of what I'm teaching and how I'm teaching, and a little bit of like what LD 37 is and CIT programs. I know it was a lot. I'm sorry. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a couple of questions. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. And let me just start off by saying I am so grateful for the work that you're doing. I just think it's really important, and I love the way that you're pulling some things in. I am General Counsel for Regional Center of Orange County. So I think everything that you have said is very consistent with our experience in terms of coordinating services. I'm curious, you talked about fifth category, which I absolutely appreciate, because sometimes those are the individuals who it's the most challenging to identify services to meet their needs. Sometimes the individuals, or some of the individuals in that category, qualified due to traumatic brain injury. So I'm
Yes.
curious if you cover TBI at all when you're talking about fifth category. And then the other question I have is just whether you cover or if you're aware of anything that covers individuals who might be dually diagnosed, because we know, individuals with developmental disabilities can also have a mental health diagnosis. And so that can make it a little more complex. And is there anything that you're aware of that covers that as well?
I do cover that. I cover, and so during my LD 37 class, I make sure, I have a brother with developmental disabilities and co-occurring mental health. So I make sure that we cover that piece, the schizoaffective disorder versus, with someone who also may have intellectual disabilities. I definitely cover it in the LD 37 during the police academy session. It really is hit or miss with CIT because each program will only give me a certain amount of time. Okay, so remember, it's a 40-hour session where they're having to cover the human trafficking, anything, and you guys will have a copy of the slides, but you'll see that it's such a cramped 40 hours that sometimes I'm lucky if I get an hour, and sometimes, like I said, I work very closely with Kern County Sheriff's, Bakersfield PD, and they're the ones that have given me the most amount of time because they really see the benefit of it. But when I'm able to, yes, I definitely cover the co-occurring. I talk about TBIs, and I didn't highlight TBIs with the LD 37, but in LD 37, there's one portion of just TBIs, and we talk about CTE, we talk about the co-occurring piece, and we also talk about how that's how most of them meet fifth category criteria.
Thank you.
Any other discussion or questions for Ms. Cruz from the panel?
I don't know about questions. Sorry. I just wanted to say thank you for all your work that you do. There's so much here that I align with. And I really love the fact that in your training you do site visits and how important that is. It is something that I have said for years, that there has to be more hands-on. You can't just sit in a 30-minute course on autism, as you said, and absorb what you need to absorb. You really need to interact with the individuals to understand it.
So I just want to clarify, I don't do site visits because, but it's part of the, and let me just clarify a little bit more on that 40-hour piece, right? I'm only one of the presenters that comes in and presents. Some CIT programs do have site visits. Some don't. What I do is I make sure that I always have a person with lived experience that comes in and talks about their experience. And in fact, in Kern County does the CIT programming for the Sheriff's Department in Bakersfield. And we do have a young adult that comes in and talks about his experiences. And then we have a lady that comes in. Okay, this is the best part of my class. She comes in with the most amazing Great Dane that is a service dog that basically gives her compression when she has high anxiety. So she teaches law enforcement about that. So they don't get to do the site visit, but we bring the site visit to them. But it is a crucial piece.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. That's all for me.
I have a quick question about the learning domain 37. Can you speak to whether the speaker outline covers like interviewing individuals with IDD who may have been victims of a crime?
Yes, it does. And it goes back to, so what I showed you guys is just the quick outline. I can drop the actual guidebook or the workbook on the chat so you can, you know, see the actual workbook. I think it'd be a good idea for you guys all to see the workbook. And then based on that workbook, like we all will develop our own syllabus of what it's going to look like, of what, you know, what I'm teaching, when I'm teaching it, what time, or an outline of it, right? But yeah, we do a piece on interviewing victims. We do a piece of, I mean, there's a lot of role play in my class. And then at the end of my class, they have to, at the beginning of the class, I tell them that, you know, they're going to have to come up with a scenario. So they, by the end of the class, they've all come up with their scenario, and they're very engaged. And so scenarios can, I mean, they come up with the whole thing. So, I mean, I think the one that I remember the most is one of my groups came up with a scenario where a woman who had like serious and self-injurious behaviors, and even, you know, trying to get her to calm down. And so they, you know, they do come up with different scenarios as well, and we do a lot of interview stuff as well.
So I have a question. So we've looked at the initial training component that you provide. Is there ongoing training and refresher courses that come into the queue going, you know, outlying years of the officers and departments?
What do you mean? Like, I mean, I think there's always ongoing training, and I think it really, I guess I'm not understanding the question. You mean just ongoing after they're, I mean, once they're officers, or beyond the CIT training? Is that what you mean?
Just
Yeah,
refresher courses to bring people up to speed on maybe new nuances or anything after, you know, their initial trainings are taken. As like, is it just one and done, or is there accomplishments after that going forward?
well, I think it depends. I think it depends on the department. I was so the other thing, so I was in Salinas last week doing a CIT training, and it was the 40-hour training. They actually had probation there, because probation also, you know, will come to some of the CIT trainings as well. And I had been talking to one of the probation officers, and she had told me that she hadn't actually done the CIT training in almost 10 years. So she said, oh, this is a lot more information than what I originally got. So I think it depends on the department. I think some departments are doing it a lot more, especially with, you know, seeing just an increase in interactions. I think, yeah, I think it really depends on the department. And I think maybe, because I know you're going to have LAPD next, and I know that they do different types of trainings. I think it all depends on the department.
Well, I think one of the nuances that Councilmember Brazil brought up in the last meeting was the ability to afford to do trainings too, rural versus metropolitan and whatnot. So I think that's something that needs to be acknowledged, where, you know, not everybody has the capacity for ongoing trainings or information or whatever. So I just wanted to bring that to light.
Yeah. And that's, you know, one of the things that I started, because we see a need in funding issues, right? I have a collaborative. It meets every quarter, and it's statewide CIT programs. We have about 25 that meet. In fact, we're meeting next week, and each meeting, it's one of the programs will talk about what they're doing. So next week, we actually have the Eureka Police Department. And as you guys know, that's a very rural area. So they're having to do a lot with very little. So they're going to talk about how they're doing their program. Because we understand that California is so big, and we have rural areas, we have metropolitan areas, we have all these areas that are going to require different type of programming, right? So, you know, I think one of the things that we always discuss at this collaborative is we talk about funding sources. So if Department of Justice has any grants available, I shoot it out to them so that they're aware, because really that's the only way they're going to be able to do some of this work with some of the funding. And Department of Justice, they actually do have a lot of funding available. It's just a matter of, going through the process of applying for them. And sometimes, it can be very time consuming, and a lot of police departments don't have grant writers. So, or the smaller ones.
Thank you for that. One other
Mhm.
question. So basically, one of the things that you had showed importance was a school resource officer in the schools. A lot of cities don't, or police departments don't fund that for the districts. And, in case in point. So one of the things that, would there be, a consideration of engaging not only the police departments for the training, but also city councils that have to approve this funding for the SRO, right?
Mhm.
And, I just know from personal experience that the SROs in our area have been instrumental in going into the special education classes and making friends with them and creating that, awareness, right? And so one of the things that I think is, maybe needs to be addressed also is the participation of cities, if, and again, it's a cost issue,
Mhm.
but, understanding the importance of that engagement at that level early on. And one of the things I'm going to do is, at some point in time, and ask the council and our staff is to be able to engage with, the superintendent of public instruction, the director of special education on how they can integrate with law enforcement, some kind of curriculum, right? So.
And just so I mean, there are some SROs that are actually part of that. I've seen them at the 40-hour CIT training. So I could tell you San Bernardino, for example, when I used to teach in San Bernardino a lot, and we always had it. I think we've had several SROs there. Bringing in probation, corrections. I could tell you that Bakersfield and Kern County, they often save spots for corrections, because even corrections need it.
Mhm. And I'm just, concerned about the cities that don't put that importance on the SRO in their school districts, be able to be proactive in that vein. So thank you for that. Any other discussion with our wonderful Ms. Cruz to go forward on any questions or thoughts? And I don't have a full picture of folks with their hands, so if you do, please just speak up. Seeing nobody has any questions, you've fulfilled all of their hopes and dreams for this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Very, very comprehensive. Appreciate your expertise and your participation and your advocacy also, and being a member, having a family member gives you a lot of credibility also in your world, right? And I appreciate that. Look forward to communicating with you. Please participate in the future meetings. See where we're going, because I really appreciate what you're accomplishing. So with that,
Thank you.
again, and one more chance for Ms. Cruz with the council. I just want to make sure that everybody has their chance to weigh in.
Well,
See,
thank you all. Thank you all. I really appreciate this opportunity.
thank you so much, and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thanks.
Chair
Thank you.
Fraser, if we may, I've been informed by our parliamentarian, Doretha Johnson, that we actually may need to go back to agenda item 7, for the council to actually provide us via a motion with authorization to work with you on a plan for reviewing the trainings and in consultation with you and Chair Zuniga to create an evaluation tool. I can formulate that motion a bit easier, but if it's all right with you, it would be helpful if we could, if you don't mind, going back to agenda item 7. I believe the next thing on the agenda would actually be lunch. So if we
So
could do
that being
before
said,
lunch.
that being said, my bad. We will make sure we move back to and open up agenda item 7 to be able to entertain a motion. Would you like to present the motion?
I will say, yeah, so I think if the council wishes to make a motion to formalize the direction that was provided earlier, back to agenda item 7, to authorize the DOJ to work with the chair and vice chair to formulate a plan for the review and observation of trainings and develop a rubric for that evaluation process. Would anyone like to make that motion?
So moved. Vice Chair.
We need a second.
Second.
Mr. Phillips is second. Vice Chair Zuniga is first. Madam Parliamentarian, please call the roll.
Might be having some technical difficulties, so perhaps
Talking.
I can. Is Ben Conway on the line? Oh, okay. I suppose I could go ahead and try to call this roll as best as I could, or perhaps if you can, Chair Frazier. I'm happy to do it too, though, if that is better for you.
So I will open up and call the roll. I don't
Thank
have
you.
a list of the participants in front of me at this second. Here we go. I'll call for the roll. Chair Frazier, yes. Vice Chair Zuniga,
Yes.
Councilmember Brazil is absent. Member Brown,
Yes.
Member Burt,
Aye.
Member Libero,
Aye.
Member Pederuto,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Yes, please.
and Member Tingaretis. Member Tingaretis? Might have
Think
stepped up. Pardon me?
I said, I think we lost her.
Okay. So what does that give us a count of? I didn't even take track. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So that's 7. I believe 7 ayes. That makes the motion passed and move forward. The motion for number 7 is passed. So
Thank you
We've-
very much. And I really sincerely apologize. Our parliamentarian is having severe technical difficulties. She just texted me, and I apologize that this might mean redoing this vote, but apparently we also need to call for a discussion on the motion before the vote. I'm so sorry.
no worries. I mean, we're way ahead of schedule anyway. So, I mean, to do some housekeeping is not a big problem.
Thank you. And thank you for bearing with us.
Hey, I'm
so-
lucky I can log in. So,
So I'm sorry, I'm getting the instructions right now. So if we could have a discussion on the motion first and then call the vote and then call the vote.
excuse me. So yes, let's have is there any discussion warranted by any of the council members on agenda item 7? Seeing none, the discussion opportunity is closed. Now, I guess we'll initiate another roll call? Is
I
that
think that that is correct. Thank
okay?
you.
Chair Frazier, aye. Chair, Vice Chair Zuniga,
Aye.
Member Brown,
Aye.
Member Burt,
Aye.
Member LeBarrow,
Aye.
Member Pederuto,
Aye.
Member Phillips,
Aye.
Member Tingaretis. Member Tingaretis has stepped out, and also Member Brazil, which we know is absent. So we have 7 votes, which creates a quorum, and that motion passes forward. And open to do it again.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
think that that is correct. I am so sorry. I am
No,
not
no, hey.
a parliamentary expert, so I
Want to
apologize.
do it right. So it's Friday.
That's right.
Okay, so moving forward, next item on mine, it is 11:24. Would we like to reconvene in an hour or back at 1 o'clock? I'm open to discussion on that with the council. Any suggestions?
1 hour.
1 hour? Member Brown suggests an hour? I'm in agreement. How about everybody else? Sound good?
One thing I do want to note, I apologize, is that we have a presentation at 1:05 with the Los Angeles Police Department. I am not sure if they will be able to log on early for that.
Great
And
point.
we also have a presentation with the Ventura Sheriff's Department. If the council wishes, we can see if either of them, if we could rearrange. Or alternatively, if the council wants to, get through things, we can always move to discussion item 17, which does not involve a witness or a presenter, which is setting up the 4th meeting and giving us authority if the council wishes to set the agenda with you and set the meeting dates.
With a fear of upsetting the apple cart with the presentations and scheduled witnesses and panelists, I really would feel more comfortable not having to move them up. And with that information just provided. Is that okay with everybody? Member Brown also?
Yes.
Thank you.
I may propose we could come back maybe at 12:45, and if you wanted to move up agenda item 17, we could do that agenda item then, which again is setting the 4th meeting date and agenda, or alternatively delegating authority to the DOJ to do that.
You know what? I think that's a great idea. Let's adjourn till 12:45
Thank you.
and look at number 17 up till the 1 o'clock hour. And like I say, I think that's very doable.
Thank you.
So I don't think we need a motion. It's posted. So we're going to go ahead and recess and reestablish a quorum at 12:45. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
So, think we have everybody? Did everybody get some lunch? We're good? People are semi-awake, or did they eat something that's gonna make them go to sleep? I know I could use a nap. My son's had me up since 2 a.m., so. Okay. Marissa and our Oakland folks, if you guys are ready, just let me know and I'll call it back to order. For our members of our council, just so you all know, our Chair Frazier had a doctor's thing that came up and asked me to take over for the afternoon. So you all just, staff, let me know when you're ready and I'll call it back to order. Have roll call and establish a quorum done by.
Should be able to in just 1 minute. I just want to make sure that we're all good.
Starting, right? I thought we publicly aren't starting until 1.
They said 12:45.
Oh, no, sorry, go ahead. Oh,
Teresa,
Yes, we can hear you.
yeah. Okay,
Now, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay. This is Teresa Johnson, and I am the parliamentarian who will be calling roll to determine if there is a quorum. Chair Fraser is absent. Vice Chair Zuniga.
Present.
Vice Chair Zuniga is present. Member Brazil. Member Brazil is, absent. Member Brown.
Present.
Member Brown is present. Member Burt.
Present.
Member Burt is present. Chair Fraser. Did I already? Okay. Member Lavero.
Present.
Member Lavero is present. Member Petarudo.
Present.
Member Petarudo is present. Member Phillips.
Present.
Member Phillips is present. Member Pangaridi. Member Pangaridi is absent. Madam Vice Chair, there are 9 members on the council. Requires 5 members present to be to establish a quorum. There are 6 members present, and the quorum has been reestablished.
Thank you very much, Doretha. Alrighty. So we were going to come back a little bit early and discuss number 17, the setting of the next meeting. Is that correct?
If that is what the council wishes, that is what we can do until the 1:05 presentation by LAPD.
Okay. So tentatively, we have it set for January 17th. And then also in that, we would alternatively would like delegate and give the DOJ the ability to set up the meeting date and agenda, subject to the chair's approvals. And if anybody has any ideas or thoughts on that, or the DOJ has ideas on what they would like to do, please feel free to chime in and let me know what your guys' thoughts are.
Yes, if folks have any ideas for our, I suppose that will be our 4th meeting, or would like to provide us with any direction in setting that agenda, we most certainly invite it. Or of course, you all are free to set the agenda now if you would like, if you do not want to provide us the authority to coordinate that with the chairs. I will just, I want to add one thing. Oh, and I see Councilmember Burt's hand is raised, and I do not want to impede on the council members' discussion of anything. I do want to just, add one thing, which is, as Chair Fraser alluded to earlier, we are on a really tight schedule here. And we are actually getting to, the council's mandate ends on April 15th, 2026, which, believe it or not, is around the corner and, a little over a year. So with that in mind, our suggestion would be to try to have as much information as you can, take in as much information as you can, so that we can really, begin to determine the council's so you all can determine your recommendations, and the deficiencies in the training and your recommendations about this more broadly. You may want to consider, with that in mind, either having more frequent meetings or potentially having the meetings over 2 days, or something along those lines, however you would like to see fit. I know we did already send a calendar-ing to try to get something on the, potentially on the calendar, and a date where everyone was available was January 17th. several council members, if you are interested in having a longer meeting or splitting it up over 2 days, I believe several council members were also available on January 16th as well. So, but we are at your pleasure, and however, you know, if you have ideas for the next meeting or thoughts about scheduling that meeting, we're here to support you. So I will hand it back to the council and council.
Councilmember Burt?
Actually, thank you, Marissa. That was kind of my question, is that at some point we need to stop taking in information, and how much time are we going to need to write the recommendations? And I was curious if maybe DOJ staff had a thought about, you know, we need to give ourselves 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, like what that timeline looks like.
Yeah, that is a really excellent question. And it's a lot of information that you all need to take in, right? As we had discussed for the next meeting, you know, we will work with the chairs to create a plan for you to digest or review or observe some of these trainings, and an evaluation tool for that, which I think will be really helpful. That's only one part of it though. And I would note, you know, there is still information that likely the council will want to gather on a broader scale, you know, particularly with respect to, I know folks have heard a lot about intellectual disabilities, you know, you may want to hear more about mental health conditions as well, as that's part of it. So lots more information, but to, you know, answer your question more directly, my thinking would probably be that we will want to really begin outlining and filling in the report probably starting in this spring. And then I would say, you know, the last 6 months of this, I think you all still could take in information during that time. But a lot of it, you know, I think then too will be us, you know, potentially presenting our outlines, our drafts, you know, you all working on draft sections as well. So, you know, it is a lengthy process. The drafting process will be long. And so, and I think at least 6 months before that deadline, we would, you know, want to really be in a position to really be doing the drafting. But, you know, I say that with a caveat that, you know, things can be flexible, and we might want to, you know, realistically, our team really has begun, you know, thinking through, you know, how that drafting process might look like. So you might want to, you know, we might want to even, you know, begin that earlier. So I will pause for a second and let Councilmember Brown talk. And also, if there is a moment too, and I believe she is in Oakland, we also have an individual with DOJ, Dag Goldfaden, who worked on a somewhat similar report and might be able to speak to the technicalities a little bit better than I did. But go ahead, Councilmember Brown.
Oh, no, I didn't want to stop your flow. You go ahead with your thought. I was just gonna invite someone, so. Are you good, Marissa?
Yes, go ahead and say your bit, and then perhaps
Okay.
Robin can chime in if she has anything additional to add based on her her experience with the reparations report.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to invite Michael Burnick to an upcoming
Yes,
meeting.
ma'am.
Also sit on another board with him. I don't know. I know I shared some of that information with Ms. Marissa, but I would like to consider inviting him to a future meeting. He's a well-known attorney throughout the state of California. He's also an author. He wrote the Autism Club book, and he deals a lot with law enforcement. And I think that we can really gain the knowledge he can share with our particular group.
Absolutely. And based on your recommendation, Councilmember Brown, we have reached out to him for the next meeting. And, you know, I'm happy to speak more about some, you know, other potential ideas, you know, for, you know, potentially who we could speak to at the next meeting. I'll let Robin, though, chime in about the report drafting component, if you don't mind, Robin.
Barely.
Hi, sorry, we were back on a couple of tech issues. Can you all hear me now?
We cannot hear you very well.
How about now?
She's just quiet.
You give her.
Go ahead.
Hi, sorry about that.
Yeah. please.
I mean, my general recommendation, is we work backwards from the deadline, which is 2 years. The deadline, it's not necessarily the council sunsets, but the deadline for submission of the report is 2 years from the first meeting, so that would put us, I believe, at April 14, 2026. To deal with practical aspects like having this laid out, any kind of graphic design, getting to a printer, complying with the technical aspects of how this is submitted to the legislature. I think everything has to be like fully locked and final about 1 month out from that deadline. And so I think you're going to want to be doing a last review of the full draft, basically 2 months out from that, to allow the council members to make any last changes. And I just keep working back from there. So I think ideally we have an outline, at least a tentative one by the spring. And we can start organizing. We have a lot of background material that we can start filling in and just, have discussion with the council about how it is envisioning both the scope and the organization. And we can offer a few different approaches at the next meeting, or the one after that, if that's better, for to help jumpstart that conversation, because, as Melissa noted, we ultimately want this to be what the council wants it to be. The last thing I'd say is, while I think there's room to be refining recommendations, I think as much as possible, but pretty close to up to the end when we do that final review, we're going to be wanting to be doing pretty substantial drafting, get that started well before then. It can be describing the trainings, it can be initial recommendations, it can be digesting the academic literature out there on the subject of training, and what does and doesn't add value to interactions between law enforcement and members of the public with disabilities.
Thank you, Robin. And I think if I heard you correctly, you were saying that we could begin some of this drafting as early as we can, even while you're in the midst of, reviewing and observing things, so that way we get ahead of schedule. And I think if I heard you correctly too, you were saying that we could, that we should try to have a good outline in order by the spring. Is that right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry, it was a little difficult to hear you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I mean, I think a critical question to try to get addressed as early as possible is the scope of the work. Because when we talk about interactions, I think a lot of the time most of us are thinking really primarily about interactions in the field. But that could be understood more broadly. And I think it's sometimes pretty helpful just to make sure we have clarity about the boundaries of this.
Thank you, Robin. And it's having some difficulty hearing you, but so I'll just sort of repeat, I think what were some of the main points there, which are that we need to, it would be very helpful. We'll need to really consider, you all will really need to consider the scope and the boundaries of this, as it could be, this is a huge topic. That's my, I think that I hopefully appropriately am repeating what you said with respect to that. So, I think that because there are a number of areas where this could go, right? Juvenile issues were discussed earlier. It's an area of interest. Correctional issues, for example, that's, a whole other sort of bucket. And again, keeping in mind both the IDD and the mental health focus of this, that both need to be covered. So, there are sort of a lot of ways that, this is a really broad area and you have a short time period. Not to say, I think there are ways that we can help you digest the materials and create the and, you know, come up with recommendations. And I think, you know, one thing I do want to highlight that I think I heard Robin say is some of the recommendations, you know, I think they may come from your evaluations, but they may also be coming from these presentations and other things like that, or other recommendations, you know, that you might already feel inclined to really begin thinking about.
Any other comments, thoughts? Or do we want to, because we're getting close to that 105 marker when our next speaker will be speaking. I see one of them is on. Do we want to go ahead and take an action to allow the DOJ staff to move forward with setting the agenda, meeting date and time, working with each of us as they have so wonderfully in the past, and myself and Chair Fraser, and making sure that we're accommodating everybody and getting those agendas and times and dates set? If that's the case, and I hear no other discussion or anything, I will entertain a motion.
I will move that we delegate the agenda and meeting logistics to DOJ. Hopefully this is good enough. Staff to continue for the next meeting.
We have a motion from Member Burt. Do we have a second?
Second.
I heard multiple seconds, one from Libero and one from Phillips. Is there any further discussion on the matter?
If I may, and I don't want to make us go a little longer here, but as one point of discussion, do folks have any initial thoughts about potentially having the meeting run over 2 days in order for you to hear from more witnesses and programs and others? And you can also let us know via email. We don't have to decide today, but for purposes of you know, if folks have any just sort of initial thoughts on that, that could be helpful to us, even as just some initial direction where we can take this.
Are you thinking this would be an in-person or 2 days of online meetings?
Likely, you know, and you know, we're serving at your pleasure. So if you would like for it to be an in-person meeting, you know, that's something that we can accommodate. Likely it would be similar to this, remote, and it would probably, you know, I don't think it would need to be the full 2 days. Like it might, you know, you might want to do 9 to 3 one day, a half day the second day, or something along those lines. It doesn't, you know, one thing to note is these don't always have to be like an 8 to 5. Like we can try to, you know, be a little more flexible as well.
It is something that I was open to when I was having conversations with the team. And I believe Chairman Fraser was open to as well. So like Marissa said, you can chime in on it now under discussion, or if you have ideas, feel free to shoot an email to them as well.
I'll probably send you an email later on.
Sounds good. That's absolutely fine. We can certainly work with that and work with you all and try to find a way that it may work best. But yeah, okay, so with that, I will hand it back to you, Chair Zuniga, and I think we've completed the discussion.
Okay.
Hopefully that's correct.
Yeah.
Teresa.
If I hear no further discussion, then I will hand it back over to Dorothea to do the roll call for the vote.
Thank you, Vice Chair Zuniga. I will put before you the authorization, the motion. It was properly moved and seconded to authorize DOJ to schedule the next meeting pending logistical concerns. Vice Chair Zuniga.
Aye.
Vice Chair Zuniga votes aye. Member Brown.
Aye.
Member Brown votes aye. Member Burt.
Aye.
Member Burt votes aye. Member Libero.
Aye.
Member Libero votes aye. Member Petarudu.
Aye.
Member Pettigrew votes aye. Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Phillips votes aye. Member Tina Reed? And member, Tina Reed is absent. Madam Vice Chair, there were, 6 members present and voting. There were 6 ayes and 0 nays and no abstentions.
All right, motion carries. Thank you, staff. As always, you guys are amazing and helping us keep all of our ducks in a row. So with that, we will move right on to our next agenda item, item 13, the presentation and discussion from the Los Angeles Police Department Mental Evaluation Unit and Crisis Response Support Section. I believe we have Lieutenant John Larson and Detective Elizabeth Reyes with us.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hello, thank you very much for joining us and taking the time to share a little bit about your guys' programs and what you do in reference to why we're all here today. So I will turn the floor over to you and take it away.
Okay, let me go ahead and start sharing my screen if that's okay.
Yes, you can share your screen. And I do have your deck too, if you can't get it to go.
Oh, I think I'm getting it here. All right, so let's start. We'll start from the beginning. Are we waiting for anybody else or can we begin?
We are waiting for no one else. The floor is yours.
Okay, awesome. Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So I'm gonna go ahead and let Lieutenant Larson introduce himself.
Hey, I'd like to thank you guys for the opportunity to have us present to you today. I'm Lieutenant Jonathan Larson. I am the officer in charge of our Crisis Response Support Section here at the Los Angeles Police Department. And been here assigned to that assignment approximately 2 years now, but I've been a member of the department over 21 years. And this is actually one of the most fulfilling assignments I've had yet, because we get to work with those individuals who are suffering from mental crisis or suffering from some type of mental disorder to get them help. And we're going to talk about a little bit about what we do here a little later today and our subject matter expertise and our mental evaluation health training unit in Detective 3 Elizabeth Reyes, and I'll turn the time over to her now.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Again, thank you for having us. My name is Detective Elizabeth Reyes. I am the officer in charge of our MEU's training unit, and I oversee the department's in-service mental health training, which also includes IDD. I've been a member of the LAPD for over 23 years now, and like Lieutenant Larson, this has been the most fulfilling assignment I've had, and I'm super happy to be here. So with that said, I'm going to give you just a little brief history of the mental evaluation unit, because I think it will lend itself to how it's led to the evolution of the training that we have today. So taking you back to 1991, so the LA County Board of Supervisors, they convened an incarcerated mentally ill task force. And that was both government agencies and private agencies that were charged with addressing the increased forced hospitalization and incarceration of mentally ill citizens. Then the following year in 1992, their findings concluded that there was a societal failure to adequately meet the needs of the county's mentally ill population. And that is how our system-wide mental assessment response team, otherwise known as SMART, began. It was a pilot program back in 1992. Then fast forward 1993, Los Angeles partnered up with our LA County Department of Mental Health clinician partners, and we became one of the largest co-supported, co-response models here in Los Angeles. And we partner up LA County Department of Mental Health clinician with an LAPD officer, and we respond to crisis calls in the city of Los Angeles. Here's a little synopsis kind of how we got started. If you look, I mean, this MEU, the Mental Evaluation Unit, it was known as the hospital detail back in the 1940s and 50s. If you see here, there was a training bulletin back in 1948 on how to handle mentally ill persons. Fast forward, the mental evaluation detail was established in 1985, and then it was renamed to the Mental Evaluation Unit in 1986. Here is where our SMART team became implemented, the SMART team in 1993. And in 2001, we had the Crisis Intervention Team, which was modeled after the Memphis model in Tennessee. 2005, that was the year that I came to MEU as a young police officer, and I was assigned to the SMART team. And so I did about 5 years in this assignment. And that in 2005, that was the year when we established the Case Assessment Management Program. And that is actually like the follow-up, the investigative follow-up to the crisis calls. This is a small group of detectives that have, you know, out of the box creative interventions to help manage individuals that are high risk, or those individuals where we have critical incidents happen in the field. These are the group of detectives that do go to mental health court and try to link these individuals to services. Then we have the School Threat Assessment Response Team. Then in 2014, this is what I'm going to be focusing on my presentation on, which is the mental health intervention training. This is the 40-hour course. It's a 4-day course that we deliver 25 times a year to our patrol officers, and that is a mandated training that our officers have. In 2017, we expanded our MEU to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And in 2017, we established the community engagement aspect of the program, which is our senior lead officers. And then in 2017 is when we established the unit that I currently oversee, which is the MEU training unit. And basically I have four dedicated officers, all of them who worked the SMART team first. And so who have training and experience, and we deliver the training, the in-service mental health training to the department, to our dispatchers, to our security services officers, to our custody services officers, to our dispatchers working the 911 call center. And that unit was established back in 2017. Okay, so that's a quick little synopsis of our MEU. The 5 pillars of our mental evaluation unit does include, number 1, training. And I've already kind of talked to you a little bit about the training unit. The other pillar of MEU is our triage desk. The triage desk is 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, where we have officers assigned to answer calls from patrol where they need advice, or they're requesting a SMART team to respond to their call. We have a watch commander that is available. And again, this is 24/7, 365 days a year. The next pillar is our crisis response. Now, our crisis response is our SMART teams. They're the ones that are going out to the field, assisting patrol, conducting mental health evaluations, and they're responding together. We are co-located. It is a true partnership where they are embedded with us. We attend roll calls together, and then we deploy from downtown LA into the respective bureaus. The next pillar is our follow-up component, and I've already given you a little bit of information. That's our CAMP, our Case Assessment Management Program, which is the follow-up piece to these crisis calls. And lastly, the community engagement, that's our senior lead officers. Those are our specially trained officers assigned to MEU who are going out into the community, empowering the community with education on where they can access resources before it becomes a crisis. And these are the officers who are also our hospital liaisons, who are our stakeholder points of contact, so that when things happen in the community, they engage with our MEU SLOs. That's what we call them for short, senior lead officers. So that's the 5 pillars of MEU. Those are the different sections. Now, I'm going to transition to talking about our training. And again, this is the unit that I oversee. And if you look at the pictures here, these are our uniforms. You see the officer in the top middle photograph, that's Officer Martinez. He's been in our training unit for 12 years. Again, he worked the field, and a couple of years ago, he got his doctorate degree. He's got his PsyD, and so now he's like a marriage and family therapist, but he's also a police officer that is in charge of helping train our patrol officers and how to handle mental health calls. MHIT, this pin that you see on the upper left-hand corner, that stands for Mental Health Intervention Training, and those are the uniform pins that identify what patrol officers have been through the 40-hour course. The other photographs are just our community partners. We don't just have law enforcement teaching all the blocks of instruction. We bring in all of our community partners out there. We have NAMI, we have Autism Society of Los Angeles, we have the Alzheimer's Association that teaches a block of instruction. And then lastly, we have community actors, volunteers that come and help us with the reality-based scenario training. And so they're all photographed here. What we teach. So what we teach at MHIT is a department-wide strategy. Los Angeles, luckily, is a very resource-rich city. We are very, very blessed to have so many resources. And so we have different types of strategies for different types of calls that we encounter. A big part of the training is what we focus on, that stigma reduction. And we kind of set the stage on day 1 about stigma with our introductions as instructors. We share how mental illness has personally affected us at home or on the job, and we try to normalize those conversations and break that stigma. Thirdly, risk assessment. We focus a lot on the risk assessment portion because, again, the legislature gives peace officers that authority to detain and transport somebody for a mental health evaluation. However, our clinician partners, they have to go through licensing and training and education. And so we kind of talk about that. De-escalation is a big portion of the training as well, how to talk to people and how to remind people that we are all human beings and all of us need to be treated with dignity and respect, and give them that perspective of how it's not what you say, it's kind of how you say it that will go a long way out in the field. We do touch upon case management, and again, our camp detectives kind of give our officers the resources so that they know who to contact when managing these types of cases. The legal aspects that we cover are constitutional law, case law. As you all are well aware of, the case law has changed dramatically when it comes to handling people in crisis, people with IDD, mentally ill persons. And so we have a block of instruction to update officers on just how much the law has changed and when we have authority to detain and transport somebody for a mental health evaluation. Resources. The resources are a big part of our training because again, not a lot of people know where to access these resources, how to get the help that they need, how to talk with family members, and kind of guide them, break that stigma and connect them with the right resources for their loved one or for themselves. And then lastly, we do cover a portion of the course for self-care because we do know that officers go through things as well. As we all know, 1 in 5 US adults are going to be affected by some kind of mental health crisis. Whether it be ourselves or our family members, somebody close to us, 1 in 5 is a lot of people, millions of people that are affected by mental health illnesses and crises. So we do have a block of instruction for our officers and how they can also keep themselves healthy and well. So here let me go back. Sorry about that. Here I included the expanded course outline that specifically highlights the block of instruction dedicated to IDD. Now, this block of instruction is taught by our Autism Society Los Angeles, and they do go over, even though it is an IDD presentation, they do cover a lot of autism. So even in the expanded course outline, you see here different the causes of autism, what is autism, but also in the presentation, we make sure to cover some of the other disabilities that people may not, be able to see or identify. And so that is coming straight from our expanded course outline.
And that's a 90-minute presentation, right?
Yes, thank you, LT. Yes, this is a 90-minute presentation that covers autism spectrum disorders and IDD, along with specific group activities. You see here the large group activity and debrief. The right on is that activity actually has officers put like a Post-it note on their forehead and take a crayon and try to write their names. And then we discuss it, like, well, how did you feel about that? Did you find it difficult? Did you find it, so it's something so that they can understand what a person with autism or any other type of disability would feel like. And then we discuss what would have made things easier for you. What would have helped you if we gave you more time, would that have helped you? And so on. And so we try to incorporate some type of learning activity for those officers who learn by actually hands-on activities. I've already mentioned a little bit about the mental health intervention training. So again, this is the 40-hour course that we primarily deliver. A lot of our duties, because it is a collaborative course with so many community partners, we include our Department of Mental Health clinicians to teach the rotations of the different mental illnesses that our officers are most likely to encounter. It is a 4-day course, and as I said, we do deliver it 25 times a year, every other week. As you can imagine, there's a lot of collaboration and coordination that goes into it, but because we have such a seasoned team, we've kind of overcome a lot of the challenges that we had early on, and things run very smoothly. It is a post-certified course. For those of you who don't know what POST is, it's the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training, and so this course is certified. From the inception of the course was created back in 2014, and through October 4th of this year, 5,789 LAPD officers have been trained. We do also open the course up to outside law enforcement agencies, and we prioritize our LA County Department of Mental Health clinicians that are assigned to co-responder teams. And so they are part of this number of 587 for a total of 6,376. What we prioritize, so the MHIT is prioritized for all of our probationary officers. So per Senate Bill 11, all officers in California are required to have an 8-hour crisis intervention course every 2 years or a 40-hour course. And so all of our probationary officers, MHIT is part of their extended academy time. So 11 months in the field, they will be brought back as an academy class to take MHIT. Field training officers are also prioritized because, again, Senate Bill 29 requires that all field training officers receive that training, either the 8-hour course or the 40-hour course. So again, MHIT is Senate Bill 29 compliant. So our field training officers are also prioritized. They're the ones that are teaching our probationary officers in the field. Our clinicians assigned to co-responder teams are also prioritized. Any officer assigned to homeless outreach, and of course, just all our patrol officers are mandated by the department to have MHIT training. So we not only deliver MHIT to patrol officers, but we also assist other units, and we teach a block of instruction on mental health intervention training at our Custody Services Division Academy. These are people that are working in our jails. FTO school, we have a 4-hour block at our Field Training Officer School. Our Basic Dispatcher School, we have a 2-hour block on suicide incidents. Our EBO school, that's our Emergency Board Operator, which is also part of our Communications Division, our dispatchers, and we have a 4-hour block that we teach at that school. Our Security Services Division, that is our security officers who are whose primary responsibility is the security of our city facilities, our parks, our libraries, and we have a 4-hour block of instruction at their school. Juvenile Procedure School, we provide a 1.5-hour block on how to deal with juveniles with mental illness in their school. Our Supervisor School is a 2-hour block. This is a school for brand new officers who just made sergeant or are brand new detective supervisors, and we provide a 2-hour block of instruction there. And then, of course, we provide presentations. We present at conferences such as the Co-Responder Conference, the CIT International Conference, and we're also, LAPD MEU is a law enforcement mental health learning site. We've been one of the original 6 learning sites since 2010. And so we regularly conduct presentations during our quarterly meetings with the learning site group. Here I've included a link to the First Responders Guide for persons with mental illness or developmental disability. If you haven't already, I highly encourage anybody. This is available to anybody through our California Commission on Post or Peace Officer Standards and Training. It is a quick guide that is filled with some state resources, case law summaries, do's and don'ts of what to say, what not to say to somebody who is suicidal and in crisis. It talks about de-escalating people. It talks about the different mental illnesses and some of the behavioral cues so that we're able to better identify these different mental health conditions. So that is the link. It is something that I use frequently, and it also highlights all the different types of developmental disabilities and includes the state resources for those agencies. The next the next slide that I'm gonna preface the next slide. So back in September of 2022, there was a person who donated some funding because they wanted the Los Angeles Police Department to have a training tool that would be more realistic for officers to be able to train more realistically. And they donated some funding, and we were able to purchase a virtual reality system. The company is V-Armed, and it is now permanently affixed to our gymnasium at the LA Police Academy, Elysian Park. And the next video that I'm going to show you is a 2-minute video that kind of explains the VR system and will give you a little bit of an understanding on how we use it for our MHIT, because again, we put our officers on the last day through reality-based scenario training. And the VR system is something where we can actually, instead of just imagining doing a scenario on top of a roof, communicating with somebody in a mental health crisis that's contemplating suicide, and jumping off from that roof, instead of just setting that stage for our officers and imagining that we're there, we can actually put them on top of the roof of a hotel and actually put an actor there and train more realistically. So that's the video that you're about to watch.
I'm Sergeant John LaBelle, the OIC of the Virtual Reality Training Unit here at the Los Angeles Police Department. So what we have here is a system from a company called V-Armed. It's an arena-scale virtual reality training system where I can have upwards of 10 students go in simultaneously, able to interact with each other, able to move from place to place. Problems can develop in front of them, behind them, above them, below them. And I could put live role players. I could put my own instructors in virtual reality and have a rich interaction where they can have conversations, give commands, all of that. It's pretty incredible what we can do with the system, being able to build out different scenarios.
Here in LA, they went out and they scanned actual locations in LA, so the W Hotel. We scanned it so we can train at the W Hotel. Here inside of our system, we have hotel rooms, we have the roof, we have subway system in front of it, we have Hollywood Boulevard, we have the stars on the Hollywood Boulevard.
I could put them on the corner at Skid Row. I could put them in Hollywood. They're right there on the Walk of Fame, talking to somebody experiencing a mental illness. So with that level of immersion, that's how we get them to buy the idea. And that's how you get organizational change, through training. That's how you get the real results.
You'll notice that a lot of them tend to believe they do a certain thing a certain way, but then when they replay the after action review and see what they actually did, there's a bit of a disconnect between what they in their mind think they're doing and what they actually do.
How I see VR helping me as a law enforcement officer is the experience that we get in the virtual reality, and it's actually feels that as if it's actually a real scenario compared to other type of trainings that we've been on.
Overall, I like it a lot. It seems to really help and feels like it's going to be a game changer when it comes to, I would say, uses of force, tactics, and just the technology.
Everything that happened is captured, and we can have a frank conversation so they can get better when they come across something similar in the field.
It's V-Armed system, but it's LAPD's training. It is their guidelines, it is their goals. We just provide them a space to do it.
VR's been a great partner for us. They give us the tools, they give us the assets, they give us the environments, and then it's myself and my instructors that get to build out the scenarios how we see fit. Here, it's us as a Los Angeles Police Department building LAPD scenarios.
All right. So that is how the VR is incorporated into our MHIT training. I am going to go ahead and introduce, have Lieutenant Larson continue the presentation, and we're going to now go into our MEU. So I will go ahead and give it to him.
So we've talked a little bit about our training, what we provide to all of our officers and our partners and those other law enforcement agencies. That was just a brief snapshot of what we actually do. And we do actually a lot more than that. And Liz is very modest when she talks about that, but we've also are implementing a 750-hour continuing education program for our individuals assigned to our MEU SMART units, our MEU units, because we know that the continual training has to take place. Because with the new changes in the Senate bills, with the new regulations, with law enforcement, as well as the new things that are being developed, we know that we cannot be stagnant. We have to be in the forefront of doing this. So we actually, with Liz's team and our partners throughout Department of Mental Health, as well as throughout the state of California, we believe that we are the cutting edge of what we're doing here with our mental health training. And so we're very proud of that. I want to talk a little bit about what constitutes some of our units and our assignments that Detective Reyes has talked about. So currently, under our SMART unit, in our mental evaluation unit, we have 92 specially trained officers, detectives, and supervisors. As Detective Reyes talks about, those are split up between our SMART teams, our system-wide mental assessment response teams, our mental evaluation training unit, and our case assessment management program, our follow-up teams, our follow-up detectives. And we currently have 29 clinicians assigned from the Department of Mental Health. Those are not Los Angeles Police Department employees. I wanted to reiterate, a lot of times we have a lot of individuals that don't understand the point that we are a partnership. They are actually on the payroll for the Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health, and we work in unison with them. They have different policies that they have to follow. We have different policies we have to follow, but we work together, and we've come up with an MOA so that we can work hand in hand, and it's actually worked very well. With our Department of Mental Health clinicians, these individuals are specially trained. As you see on the slides here, those are the disciplines that we have some of our clinicians receive their degrees and their training in. Why is this important? Because not every call or every incident or every client or individual we respond to is the same. So we actually have a great relationship with our partnership with our DMH partners because of our vast training. We also have our training with our implementation of our veterans training. So we actually have seen a larger increase in our veteran population, where we have actually specific clinicians and officers assigned to directly deal with our veteran population. So currently we are actually down numbers on both sides with our police officers as well as our clinicians. We've gone through since COVID, there's been a huge decrease in our numbers. However, we actually see an uptick right now in our popularity in our field response teams. And we actually have, I believe we have 8 clinicians that are in the hiring process that have been offered jobs, with another 10 or so vacancies after that. So we are ultimately trying to get up to 50 clinicians. And with that happening, it'll be about 125 to 130 officers assigned with that. When we talk about our MEU triage desk, what that is we have officers, we can assign up to 4 officers a day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And as Detective Reyes talked about, these officers do not handle calls from the outside population. These individuals handle calls from our internal patrol units and our internal personnel from LAPD, and outside agencies can call in. And what they're asking for is, have we had a prior encounter with this individual? And if so, what was the outcome of that? Before they enter in any type of communication or any type of conversation with that individual, we like to give them a little background on that. When you look at this, for the size and scope of the Los Angeles Police Department, you think, well, how many incidents or how many inquiries do these officers see on a daily basis or a yearly basis? So in 2023, we had over 95,000 inquiries or phone calls into our triage desk. On average, that's about 260 calls per day. So these officers get their work done. I mean, they actually get utilized quite a bit there. So it's one of our hidden gems, as we call it, because this program or this group of officers, which rotates, and usually you're staffed by some of our seasoned, tenured officers that are highly trained to come work our unit here. They're the ones actually that the officers are calling in, and these are the ones that are giving advice. We're doing a workup on the individual. As you can see the screen there, the computer screen, that's what one of our ME reports looks like. So we have a picture of the individual. If we have a prior contact with them, that's their driver's license photo usually. And what this does, it helps us document and helps us with our previous encounter and with our future encounters. With that being said, our case assessment management program, which is our follow-up team, will also do some add notes into these reports so that we have that wide range of training and knowledge on that individual and the prior incidents and prior resolutions that we've obtained with them. With that, so we have a lot of that we've talked about there with doing this. On a side note, Department of Mental Health also documents incidents that they capture, but it is not in this database. They have their own database because with our partnership and with the HIPAA protections with our clinicians, they have their own database that we as Los Angeles police officers and supervisors do not have access to, because we have to make sure that our clients' privacy is protected. So a lot of their clinical notes, their diagnosis is all, and their medications are all in the DMH side of their database to protect the individuals and the clients. And just so you're aware, we're going to open this up here in a little while for questions and answers. So if you have questions on any part of our presentation or what we do or any follow-up, we will give you our contact information so we can ask further follow-up questions on that. We talked about our SMART, stuff like that, but here's what it looks like. A couple of our officer teams, as Detective Reyes talked about, we do not respond in a typical police officer uniform. This is our uniform shirt, and she talked about it. It's the black shirt with our badge embroidered on it that says system-wide Los Angeles Police Department, system-wide mental assessment unit. And our clinician is usually in business or casual attire to try and develop that relationship and rapport with our client going through their mental illness at the time. They are armed officers. Typically, their weapon is covered by their shirts. So we're trying to de-escalate the situation from the start on that. With our responding units, as Detective Reyes talked about, the city of Los Angeles, for those of you who would like to know how big the city of Los Angeles is, we are 468 square miles. That could be a state amongst itself. That's how big we are. And we obviously do not have enough resources to handle every incident, every call that an individual is going through some type of crisis, but we do the best we can with that. Our current operations, we have 11 to 14 units per day, and we're 24/7, 7 days a week, and those are our watches there that we deploy to. Our heavy deployed watches, and are based on our historical data that we've obtained, is our most calls for service is usually our mid-watch calls from 1000 hours to about midnight. That's when we see the bulk of our incidents that we respond to. So that's the bulk of our deployment. Over our nighttime hours from about 2 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the morning, we will have actually, like we call it a skeleton crew. We'll have a DMH clinician and usually 1 to 2 teams working at that time. It's just because it's shocking, but the calls for service typically do not happen during that 0200 to 0600 time frame. But we also have on-call clinicians and teams if we need to rapid respond or roll out and respond to those individuals. Now, here's some of the stuff that we respond to with our SMART units, our mental evaluation team, and these things are fluid situations, and a lot of times it's hard for us to respond to everything, but respond to the proper calls. But we get dispatched from our communications division. Our operators will do their analysis. They will do their intake for the call and determine the best resource available. And we'll talk about some of the different options we have, the way that we can deploy our units or dispatch our units. But if they've determined, the communication determined that a SMART unit needs to respond, these are some of the things that we respond to. We respond to those emergency situations, those barricades, those jumpers, those individuals that are at risk harming themselves. We also respond to our patrol units. We call it the co-response program, to where we will respond in unison, in conjunction with our patrol units. In a typical world, our true world, we would want to respond at the same time as our patrol units, but sometimes it doesn't match that way, because we are a citywide response unit, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. So some things that we elevate this to, as you can see, we do not drive in a marked black and white police vehicle. We drive in unmarked vehicles that are emergency equipment equipped, meaning if the situation requires us to respond code 3, which means with lights and sirens in an expedited manner, then we're able to do that. So we can respond in a quickly manner. We always determine the level of risk with these individuals. If there is an individual that has committed a criminal offense, that individual could and typically is arrested, because the detention or the arrest always takes priority with the holds. And we have our 72-hour detentions with our 5150 holds, and that's our bread and butter. But our unit, just so everybody is aware, our primary responsibility is not to arrest the individuals. It's for them to receive help and treatment at a facility. And so that we do. And the most important part of that, and we'll talk about that in a minute with our goals. We work the best we can. We try to de-escalate and diffuse the situation where we get volunteers, compliance, and assistance. And we actually refer these individuals, if they do not meet the hold or the criteria for the hold, we put safety plans together, refer them to the appropriate resources so they can get ongoing and continual help with that. We are proud. I don't want to say proud. But with our training experience, just so you're aware, last year with our SMART units, we had one it was a non-categorical use of force, meaning we had one minor use of force in our entire year. So we tout that as a huge success for our program, and because of the fact that we work and with our training experience to help these individuals that are in need. Some of our goals, and I've mentioned this, is we want to prevent unnecessary incarceration. And if we need to help hospitalize those individuals and get them the treatment needed, we work hand in hand with different resources, different teams, different hospitals, or mental health urgent cares to get them appropriate training. And we talked about certain things. I hate reiterating all of this on the slideshow, but our goal is to help the individuals, not incarcerate them, but also, as the last bullet point is, it helps our patrol officers to return to our higher priority calls and those criminal activities in which we all became on the job for to begin with. We are working hand in hand with the different mental health agencies out there right now, so that we make sure we try to prevent duplication of mental health resources and mental health services, so that individuals know that if, for example, Los Angeles Police Department responded and put this individual on a hold, the Department of Mental Health captures that in their notes, so all of their other sister agencies and sister programs can see those notes and say, LAPD has been working with this individual, so that they can continue on with the treatment and the help that they need. In February 21st, I mentioned this, February 2021, we had a co-response model, which is we respond hand in hand with our patrol units. Our patrol units respond with our teams to make sure it's a seamless transition, to make sure it's safe for our officers, as well as, most importantly, safe for our clinician. Seeing that our clinicians are civilian, they do not have the tactical training or expertise that we as law enforcement officers have. So we have a patrol unit respond with us to where the scene becomes, as soon as the scene is safe and secure, then we introduce our clinician into the mix to help work through the needs of that client and make sure that we can do the best we can to help get them the help that they need, and also the follow-up care and support that they need. Once the scene is safe and secure, then, and they know, we believe that the our smart unit has it in hand, then we will dismiss our patrol unit, and they can go back to patrol operations. Now, we have a specific policy that we have. Of course, LAPD and law enforcement, we always have to have a policy for everything. So this is one that we have, so everybody is aware, and a lot of other agencies have adopted our policies to help with them. But this is when we respond with the subject is violent, the subject is armed, and the public is at risk. A lot of people, there's sometimes right now, and you will see with our 911 diversion program, if the subject is armed in their own residence, nobody else around, not causing a risk to the public, some of those calls we will refer to our crisis counselors, our online crisis counselors, our telephonic crisis counselors, and they will handle those, and we will not even respond as a team. We respond for mental health welfare checks. We've seen that we're doing that more and more frequently as individuals are calling in on their loved ones who are suffering some type of a mental crisis. And I've talked about this. We talked about subjects who possibly committed a criminal act. We always make sure, just because they've committed a criminal act doesn't mean that our job stops there. If they get arrested, we make sure we provide them the jail, the knowledge of what the individual is going through, making sure that if they need to go to a specialized jail facility to treat them, we make sure those are taken care of. And also, if there's after care, once they get released, we can follow up with our camp program, our camp teams, to get them the help. With the VR system, we talked about individuals who are subject to behavior at high risk that might be on elevated platforms, on top of hotels like the W Hotel that we talked about, or somebody who is possibly thinking of committing suicide, jumping off a bridge, or some of that. We go to those crisis calls very frequently on there. And we try to do all this stuff so that we can, and also our SWAT teams, we're being utilized with sending our clinicians and our officers to our SWAT callouts, our SWAT incidents, which might be typically very sensitive and could be violent encounters. We are utilized a lot to help de-escalate the situation, and also to give the crisis negotiation teams that are at scene the background and the firsthand information and the background knowledge of the history of our individuals if they have prior encounters with that. Now in 2024, there's been a big push for these alternative crisis response teams without the country. We are hand in hand working with the County of Los Angeles as well as the City of Los Angeles, to where they're developing a lot of these alternative crisis response teams, ACR teams, which are composed of usually clinicians or individuals that have specialized trained, or those individuals who have real life experience, to where those individuals will respond to calls that might not elevate to what our criteria are to elevate to calls. We work with these individuals. We make sure that these individuals, if they need elicit a police response, we respond to those as well. But one big component that we work with right now is, now that the 988, the suicide hotline, became involved and became implemented in there, we actually would like to, I'm going to go back up a little bit. When that crisis call when that nationwide hotline became involved, we had already partnershiped with our D.D. Hurst partner, who right now in Southern California, D.D. Hurst handles our 988 hotline. But back in 2021, we, LAPD, developed a contractual agreement with D.D. Hurst, where we have a 911 law enforcement diversion program. And I'm going to go into that in a little bit here, but when you see D.D. Hurst and the 988 crisis hotline, we actually, in the city of Los Angeles, utilize them in 2 different ways. For one, for a 911 law enforcement diversion line, meaning that if that call just does not rise to the level of police response, then we divert the call to them so that they can seek help. They also have a follow-up component as well, and our crisis hotline. There, we work hand in hand. If the crisis hotline determines that an individual needs police response or a MEU smart unit response, we have direct lines that we work together with to where we can dispatch units in a timely manner. Those are some of the different agencies and different things that we do, but Access and Fit, that is our DMH, our field intervention teams. Those are our unarmed teams that are employed by the Department of Mental Health. LAPD does not have any relationship with those or any oversight of those. We just get response. We respond to those if they need our help in actually getting the person to gain compliance to go on a hold, or if it elevated to a violent encounter, then that's when we respond. We work with our urgent care centers, and that's probably, I don't know if it's a statewide or a nationwide issue, but that is probably what's one of our hardest problems right now, these urgent care centers, because there's just not enough of them for us. That's why we have backlogged a lot of times. If we transport an individual for a mental evaluation hold, some of our response times, some of our hold times at these care centers could be upwards of 2, 3, 4 hours. So we are working with Department of Mental Health as well as our urgent care centers to increase beds and increase abilities to where we can reduce the wait time for them on there. And then we also have our crisis treatments there. So I don't want to rehash those, but those are some of the numbers that we have there, and everybody has access to that program, those numbers there. So in February 2021, we talked about, this is a program, it's called the Community. Oh, did I skip? Oh, so I skipped one. Sorry, did I skip one or is that it? Oh, there it is. Sorry about that. So in February 2021, I talked about this a little bit. We went in partnership with D.D. Hirsch. And this is called our Community Call Redirection to Ensure Suicide Safety. And our acronym, we have acronyms and everything, but it's our CREST program. So our communications division, as I talked about, will receive the phone call. They go through their checklist, their interview of the individual. And if the individual it's non-imminent suicide or just has suicidal thoughts, then we can divert the call to the D.D. Hirsch Suicide Prevention Center. When that started in February 2021, that was not a 24-hour program. It was about a 10-hour program. And we immediately recognized that that needed to be expanded to 24/7. So in just a few months after that, in July of 2021, it was a fully funded program, and it's a 24/7 operation. Now, just year totals to date, how that looks is we've had 1,171 calls from January to October. Those calls there, only 3% of those calls that we diverted to them, law enforcement had to respond on. So we view that as a huge success because law enforcement did not have to take the time out. And we know that every time these calls we go out there, it's a huge savings in time, as well as time and monetary savings when us and our Department of Mental Health partners do not have to respond to those calls on service. That 911 diversion program is being expanded throughout Los Angeles County to other law enforcement agencies. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department is starting their pilot program that was patterned after this program. They're starting that in 4 of their stations, starting here next month. And then it hopefully will build to the entire Los Angeles County in the near future. So with all of these other crisis response teams, the city of Los Angeles has developed certain teams. One is the Circle program, which is started in January 2022, which is a crisis and incident response through community-led engagement, Circle program. These typically do not respond to those mental health crises. However, these teams, which could be clinicians, could be individuals with specialized training or those individuals that have had real life experience in this, knowing that they might gain better traction with our individuals, our subjects, and our clients than law enforcement could. These individuals, these teams are being rolled out. It is not citywide yet. However, we have gotten some great feedback with this program here because these individuals typically target the homeless population, those individuals who might need some help in housing, those individuals who might need help in food, or just some of those traditional non-law enforcement requests or needs. And so it's actually ones that they are out there, they actually respond, and we've actually great feedback from the Circle program. And what that's called, and that's usually diverted, or the umbrella of the Circle program is over the Urban Alchemy program there. So you see those numbers there. So we like to quantify our statistics. So they've had over 15,000 calls so far this year, which is an increase to where they were last year. Now, the mayor, the Los Angeles mayor, Mayor Bass's office, they seeing that how much work and how many calls that we were responding to on an annual basis, they developed their own version of an alternative crisis response team, which is an unarmed model of crisis response. And that one there started in May of 2024 and was only assigned out of 21 of our geographical areas. It started off with only 3 areas being assigned, and starting Monday, it's expanding. This Monday coming up is expanding to 6 areas. And you can see these calls that they are responding to, which we're in the talks right now, because I sit on all those committees, on what else we can do to help divert some of the calls away from law enforcement to these specialized teams. And this team actually will respond to calls which are nonviolent, that are related to mental health calls. Also substance abuse calls, alcohol abuse calls, some disputes, well-being checks that are not mental health related and do not require, some of our wellness checks. We have to enter somebody's residence. These individuals are not allowed to do that. And these are individuals we have subcontractors with the county that are trained clinicians, as well as but non-LPS designated clientele here. And as just for the first several months from March till October, they've responded to 2,700 calls. And it'll be interesting once we get this full scale, because this team and our Circle team, they are not assigned in the same areas. So they are working to make it help to get all to target as much of the population as we can. So it's sort of like a strategic pinpoint approach, but it's actually been very successful to date. Now, the County of Los Angeles has their psychiatric mobile response teams. These are the individuals who have a clinician, and they are able to place individuals on 5150 holds. They're LPS designated, and we work hand in hand with these teams, especially if the individual will not voluntarily go with them, because they have to gain voluntary compliance for the individual to go on the hold. And sometimes, and it's not very, very many times, law enforcement will get called to help try to gain voluntary compliance by using de-escalation and helping just with the uniform or our expertise and training to gain them. So this is a DMH, Department of Mental Health program that we work hand in hand with. This is the Los Angeles County-wide program, and they have certain sectors that they work in the city of Los Angeles, and then they work in conjunction with us on there. That is a brief overview of what we have, what we've talked about here. The one thing we want to talk about, we have our contact number after that. We have that. One thing, we're going to open this up for questions. We wanted to leave approximately about 25 to 30 minutes if there are questions, because as with this overview, I know that with each one of your specialties, you might have some question or some clarification. And so at that time, we'd like to turn the time over for some questions, if there are any.
And here
Alrighty.
are
Sorry, go ahead, Doretha. I thought somebody was saying something over there. All right, well, thank you guys very much. That was a lot of information, a lot of great work. It surely sounds like you guys have been doing some stuff over the years that falls in line with so many things I've worked on. But I think in your presentation, you answered all of my questions, but I do see my fellow council member Bert's hand up, so I will turn the floor over to her.
Thank you. I was trying to see if anybody else wanted to go first. Great presentation, and I've had the privilege looking at your site and some of the programs, and just thank you for leading not just the state, but the nation and all the work you do. It's just really, really impressive. I do have a couple questions. I was curious, the urgent care, and this is just my ignorance, that is that a behavioral hospital or is that a medical hospital? When you were talking about, you know, I absolutely know that there's a shortage of behavioral health beds. I was just curious if you are ending up in like medical hospitals, like in emergency rooms, or are they behavioral health centers?
the behavioral health centers, because we can only take those individuals. The urgent care centers are 23 hours and 59 minutes. So within that time frame, the doctors need to determine, are we going, if this person needs longer care or to be stabilized, then they arrange transportation to another LPS designated facility so that the person can get additional treatment. They are not equipped for emergencies. So if the individual, the individual has to be ambulatory, they have to, they will take individuals that are intoxicated, but if they have any type of, like a female that's in her 3rd trimester of pregnancy, you know, they don't take those individuals. So we do have to take them to an ER to get medically cleared first. But again, they'll even take people that are on parole. I mean, they will, and what's wonderful about the urgent care centers is that we're able to do drop-offs like 15 to 30 minutes.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's why we tell our officers, like, don't take anybody who's combative because they don't have the resources to handle that. Everybody that you take to your urgent care centers, you know, it's a place where there's lazy boy chairs, the televisions are muted, you know, individuals can do their laundry, they get a little food. I mean, it's a wonderful resource, and it's not like an ER where somebody's just, you know, kept there for hours and hours and hours.
Wow. Very impressive. So 2 other questions. I am a parent of a son with autism, and I'm glad that you guys work with the Autism Society out in Los Angeles. They speak very highly of you. I'm curious if there's a training component. You know, I know you train with them, but when you're getting, and you don't get the 988 calls, but when these emergency calls come in, is there some sort of, you know, questioning that says, is this somebody with autism who's having behavioral dysregulation, right? And acting out and maybe punching holes in the wall and that type of thing, versus somebody who is off their medication. Is there training for that, or are there different procedures for that?
There is, I mean, our mental health intervention training covers basically you're going to conduct an investigation, and you're going to talk to that reporting party, that parent, that person who created the call, right? If that person's available, you're going to take that credible 3rd-party information, and you're going to ask questions, and and hopefully, because we're covering the different kind of behaviors, they are able to, based on their training and their experience, they can tell when it's somebody with autism, or they'll ask additional questions if there's a mental health diagnosis, or if they've ever been prescribed some type of medication for a medical condition. And so those types of questions, then it gives you a little bit more insight. Are you dealing with somebody who is unable to process the information? Or do they have a mental illness? Do they have a developmental disability? You know, IDD, I mean, it's such a range, right? It's a autism spectrum disorder. You have so many people on different spectrums that our officers are being trained to ask a lot more questions than just, you know, are you, you know, do you want to hurt yourself? Do you want to hurt somebody else? Or, you know, do you have the basic needs? No, we're training them to actually do a complete investigation, ask more questions, really dig deeper to know. So to your point, to see, are you dealing with somebody with a mental illness or maybe with a developmental disability? And so that will kind of direct you on how to better communicate with that individual.
And then my last question, I'm sure you've gotten before as you present. I love your 5 pillars, but I'm curious for a smaller department who may be just starting or not know where to start. Where would you recommend they prioritize out of the 5 pillars?
Well, because we host so many law enforcement agencies, as I pointed out earlier, we're a law enforcement mental health learning site. So we regularly host people, agencies who are just starting. And the number one thing that I recommend to them is if you're not capturing the data, you need to start there, because how are you supposed to deploy resources and know what you need if you don't have a system in place to actually capture the data? You're not able to, like Lieutenant Larson was pointed out, you know, we deploy the majority of our SMART teams during the times when we receive the most calls, which is between, you know,
10 and midnight.
10 and midnight. So if an agency is not capturing that data, then we're not able to deploy accurate resources. But like I tell everybody who comes here, because we have agencies that are very small that come here, and obviously they don't have the same resources we have, and I get it. But I think everything that we have here in LA is completely and totally scalable. You may not have 29 clinicians, but maybe you have 1 clinician that maybe you can share with other neighboring law enforcement agencies. So, you know, we try to provide, like, our policies, we'll give them, you know, our policies, we'll give them PowerPoint presentations, we'll give them the information, and then they make it their own to serve their community's needs. But everything is scalable.
Can I chime in for a second there? One other thing that we've done in Los Angeles County, which I would hope would blossom and bloom across the state, is we've actually developed, we had a working group that we created a best practices approach for these smaller law enforcement agencies. And it was actually just published by the CCJC of Los Angeles County last week. It was in September, just so if you're going to look at that. And it actually gives you a template and to give you guidelines for these smaller agencies or any law enforcement agency on how you can develop programs like this and how your officers should respond, or how your team should respond to individuals. So we're trying to help train and better everybody. So we've developed some best practices that, yeah, granted, Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and us, we were primarily into this, but we also brought in quite a few, several other law enforcement agencies throughout Southern California, and the Los Angeles County Chief of Police was on that. Organizational chief of police was on that, and Bell Gardens and a lot of other smaller agencies. And granted, they see the vast dynamics that we have with us, with LAPD and LA County Sheriff's Department. But as Liz says, it's definitely, we provided this document now to where you can scale it to your needs as your agency requires.
Great. Thank you for mentioning that resource, and thank you again.
Any other questions from anyone?
Madam Vice Chair.
Moment, please.
Madam Vice Chair, I just wanted to let the record reflect that member single readings has joined the meeting.
Yes, yes. Thank you. I did see that. Any other burning questions from anyone? Took so many notes. I don't think I have any off the top of my head, but I don't see any from anyone else. Well, we do have all your contact information. If anything comes to mind, I can guarantee you we will be reaching out. With that, unless, do you guys have any parting words? Oh, you know what? Something did come to mind. If there was anything that you guys could better upon what you already do, what would that be? Because we had a previous speaker that said that there was some things that they would like to see more emphasized in the trainings that they do. Is there anything that you guys think could better your program?
When you say better the program, are you talking about our training or are you talking about our MEU mental evaluation unit as a whole?
Both, either or. Is there something you guys might be lacking that you'd like to have more funding for, or more technology for, or more access to?
I will start and let Liz think about that. It's interesting how we talk about that. Of course, we want to, of course, right now, LAPD, just with number wise, we're only able to respond to 25% of the calls, of mental health calls, right? So we only about a quarter of them right now. That's why it's important that we're establishing all these other teams to help us out that are taking away some of the low-lying fruit, the low-lying calls that don't elicit a law enforcement response on that one there. The one thing that we do, I think that we actually need, and granted, we talked about it's with our community partners with better facilities, more of those facilities to help care for our individuals that are in need. That's probably primary, not on the law enforcement side, but with our community partners, building up those urgent care centers, those facilities that can actually treat these individuals. Because a lot of the times, if we could take a step back away from this mix and put more back with the trained professionals, we're trained, but we're trained in a different area, in a different aspect. And I think if we could work to better talk about that, we're working at right now, trying to develop a program to where all these different other programs can communicate and talk to each other so that our clients, for example, LAPD, if we come in contact with this individual and then next week LA County Sheriff's come in contact with this individual, that we know that, hey, we've actually, in 2 weeks, we made contact with the same individual, and here's what we've done to help that individual. When I started 2 years ago, that hasn't taken place, and we're in works and discussions right now to make that happen on that stuff, to make that work there. On the training aspect, one thing I will talk about, which is a failure on our end, and we're changing that failure on our end, is Liz, Detective Reyes put up who we provide training to, and it talks about our probationary officers. It talks about our field training officers are out there. Right now, we've recognized the fact that if you're not a probationary officer and you're not a field training officer, and we have a lot of officers, we call them police officer twos, just ordinary beat cops out there, they're not required to do this. And also supervisors that are out there controlling these scenes aren't required to attend MHIT. Well, we've recognized that, and we are actually we put a plan into place and got approval from the chief about 3 weeks ago that now everybody who works patrol and responds to these calls are going to receive our MEU training, our MHIT training. So that's our big thing is, and also just training. I would think if we could provide more training to our individuals and our partners, and however, what that looks like, whether that's state-based training through the state of California through Post, or whether it's through our private entities, but making it to where everybody can continual training is key and paramount to the success of any of these programs, especially ours.
Sorry, this is Chief Tiarides. I want to, first of all, thank you so much, Captain Larson and Detective Reyes. Excellent, comprehensive presentation. And I know it could be a lot much more, but thank you both so much for putting your time and effort into it. Something else that I wanted to add to that was training outward. You know, we do training internally, but externally to the community on what law enforcement does. Oftentimes, you'll have families who say, well, what is your protocol? What can and can't you do? Do you have to handcuff my child if he's going through an issue that may not necessarily be crime related, but having a crisis? And so our outreach to the community is extremely important in teaching them our policies, our roles, our responsibilities, and how we respond to individuals with, you know, the IDD protocols. And I think as law enforcement agencies, you asked Liz, or was it Astrid, what more we could do, or what would we wish for, is to have a more robust information sharing externally to the community on how law enforcement agencies do respond.
Love all of that. I do. I really do. I like the idea of, you know, bringing in as many officers as you can to have these trainings. That's just my hopes, is that making sure that you all have the education and tools that you need to effectively do your guys' jobs, and our loved ones are safe as well. So thank you all very much for that. One more time, is there any more questions? I think. No? Okay.
I believe Councilmember Phillips may have his
Thought he
hand
was
raised.
raising his hand, but I'm not sure. Councilmember Phillips, do you have a question?
Well, I want to say thank you for everything. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. We appreciate the opportunity, sir.
Well, if there are no more questions, I will say thank you again for joining us and sharing your guys' program and training and all of the wonderful things that you guys are doing. And I'm sure if we all have questions for you, we will be in touch. But thank you all again very much for joining us today.
No problem. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
And I think that puts us right close to being on time for a small break. I have on my agenda here that we have a break from 2:30 to 2:40, and it is 2:25 by my clock. So if nobody is objective to that, we will take a small 10-minute break or so. Does that sound like a plan? I think our next speaker is at 2:45. So if we want to stand and recess until 2:40. All right. Okay. We'll see you all back here in about 12-ish minutes, give or take.
It is 2:40 and the meeting is resumed. I will call the roll to ascertain if a quorum has been reestablished, beginning with Vice Chair Zuniga.
Present.
Vice Chair Zuniga is present. Member Brazil?
Listen. Oh, who that was?
I'm sorry? Member Brazil? Okay, is absent. Member Brown?
Present.
Member Brown is present. Member Byrd?
Present.
Member Byrd is present. Member Libero?
Present.
Member Libero is present. Member Petarudo?
Present.
Member Petarudo is present. Member Phillips? Member Phillips
Present.
is present. Member Tingarides?
Member Tingarides present.
I'm sorry, is present. Thank you. Member Tingarides is present. Madam Vice Chair, there are 9 members on the advisory council, and the number required for a quorum is 5. There are 7 members present, and a quorum has been reestablished.
Thank you very much, Madam Parliamentarian. Alrighty, I see that our next speaker is here, and this is Mark Stadler, the Senior Program Administrator for Ventura County Sheriff's Office Crisis Intervention Team. And we welcome you. Thank you for joining us today to have these very important conversations. And I turn the floor over to you, sir.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. I'll go to my screen share. All right. All right, I'm guessing you can see it now, correct? Awesome. Okay, so first of all, again, thanks for having me. I'd listened to the two earlier presentations, so I promise you I won't dwell on any topics that have already been thoroughly covered. I have the opportunity to work with Yolanda Cruz in the past, who collaborated on some stuff here in the state of California, and then also worked with Elizabeth Reyes on a post project. So for me, I've been in law enforcement for January will be 38 years. Started my career with the city of Santa Barbara for 3 years as a police officer. Then I transferred to the city of Ventura, worked there another 25.5 years, retired as a commander 9 years ago. But since then, I took over this position with Ventura County Sheriff's Office, running their CIT program. But I'm not new to the CIT program. I helped start the program back in 2001, and with the CIT program, it was a long collaboration. Is my screen still sharing? Okay, awesome. It changed on my end. That's the only reason I'm asking. Yeah, so let me see. I think I lost my view.
Mark, I could go ahead and share my screen. I have your deck. If you wanted to say next slide, we could do that. I have a copy of this.
Okay. Which slide are you seeing right now?
I'm seeing, you need to change it to slideshow. You need to go to your slideshow and hit from the beginning. Go to your left where it says slideshow up in the ribbon, up top.
Yeah.
Keep going over to your right. There you go. And hit from the beginning.
There we go. Okay. Anyway, so the first slide just shows our collaboration, how we began in Ventura County. We're about 830,000 people in Ventura County, and this is how our collaboration's grown. We have probably, I think we're still the only county in the state of California that has every single law enforcement agency going through the same training. And we train our Cal State University police, community college police, probation, FBI, literally every law enforcement agency goes through our training. And this is some of the partners that we have. We've developed a lot of relationships and collaborations over the years that's given us the strength that we've had. We started in 2001, so we've been around for 23 years now. And so how we got our start, we, like a lot of other areas, you know, we experienced a series of officer-involved shootings in the late 90s, early 2000s. And with that, you know, there's the loss of life, loss of officers, loss of public confidence, and civil litigation when incidents like that happen. So our law enforcement leadership at the time said there has to be a better way. So why me? Why did I get involved in this? I was asked by an assistant chief at that time in 2001 if I'd be interested in collaborating in this because he knew my story. When I was a new officer with the city of Santa Barbara, I was involved in a shooting. A man who had a mental health break came out of his hotel room in a hotel in downtown Santa Barbara and started attacking people with a machete. And at the time, not having much experience, and I think back in 1987 when I went through the academy, we had about 2 hours of mental health training, and half of that was on how to fill out the paperwork. So being on scene with an officer I'd never even met before and not having a better idea, the plan we put into place ultimately led to the man charging toward me, swinging a machete, and I ended up shooting and killing him. And, you know, for a long time, people asked me, well, would you have done anything different? Initially, I was like, no, he charged at me and I defended myself. But as time went on, I thought, you know, I would have liked to try to talk to him, find out what had gone so wrong in his day that he ultimately had died suicide by a cop at my hands. So, and I even got a call from his mother after it happened. And she believed, based on his religious background, that he didn't want to take his own life, and he had me do it for him. She actually called to apologize to me, which is extremely rare. And there was no lawsuit following my incident. But so that's what led me to taking an interest in this. And because I knew there's a better way also. More tools for law enforcement. At that time, we didn't have the less lethal weaponry that we have now. And all we had was basically baton, gun, and mace, pepper spray these days. So, as I said, Ventura County is about 830,000. So I think it's interesting this morning, you got the perspective from Yolanda and the state side, and then now you got LA County, LA City, talk to you about their program. And so we're a little bit smaller program, but again, we've been around for a while and we're established. So we partnered with Ventura County Behavioral Health, National Alliance on Mental Illness here in Ventura County, and started doing our research. We followed the Memphis model, started in 1988, Memphis, Tennessee. I know Yolanda covered that in detail, but we looked at a model that Long Beach had, where you had a clinician riding along in a car with an officer. And, but we realized that was a little bit more financially prohibitive, in that you have a full-time officer working with a full-time clinician. And also you have the issue of, if there's a call in progress that's going on, the officer that's in that car is going to respond to the call. There's not a lot of clinicians that want to be riding in a police car when things are going really bad. So we went to San Jose Police Department, myself, a doctor from Behavioral Health, and another officer from Ventura Police. And San Jose was using the Memphis Model training program. They'd been trained directly from Memphis. And after going through the class, we realized, this will work for our community, because you can train an officer on how to deal with a mental health crisis and a behavioral health crisis. And when they're not handling those calls, they can handle a regular call for service. So we began a partnership with the main agencies in our county, which is Ventura Police, Oxnard Police, the Sheriff's Department, and all their contract cities. And then again with NAMI and Ventura County Behavioral Health. So with a multi-agency leadership, what's extremely important with that is having administrative support. So we were fortunate we had command staff support from the very beginning. And for me, when we first started the training, I put a strong emphasis on making sure we got the sergeants and the field training officers and the school resource officers through the program. At the time we started it, I was a sergeant, and I recognize that that's a really important rank within the organization, as you're not management, but you're supervising all the line level officers, and having them on board and being able to reinforce what they learn in the training with their officers is extremely important. And then also you need a couple of champions. Every now and then you find people around your department that just really engage and they want to be part of this type of a program and training. And those are the ones you bring under your wing and have them help out with the training. So the interagency cooperation and collaboration is huge. Luckily, in our county, we have a committee where the sheriff and all the chiefs meet on a monthly basis. And we had universal buy-in from all of them, recognizing that we all had the same problem, where the mental health issue was getting worse, people with behavioral issues, and law enforcement back then was not equipped to handle it. So the goals of our program were to reduce the intensity of a crisis using de-escalation strategies, reduce the necessity for use of force, promote pre-custody diversion, and collaborate with mental health consumers, their families, the community, and the stakeholders to build a vibrant, accessible system. So Ventura County Sheriff's Office became the lead agency. They got a grant and were able to hire a full-time coordinator. I now hold that position. I've been doing that for the last 9 years. I'm a senior program administrator, so I'm no longer a sworn officer, but I train all the law enforcement. Program staff, I have one additional staff that works with me, and we have a volunteer. So essentially there's 2 of us running the whole program for all law enforcement in the county. And we're based in a centralized location in the county, and we hold quarterly meetings with our coordinators and all of our stakeholders. and I'll give you a sample of who that is in a minute. But the things that we provide, instruction for the basic academy. So Yolanda talked about the LD 37. So we provide that training in LD 37. Also, I provide training in learning domain 20, which is use of force. Very fortunate, about 5 years ago, I worked with Post and we built a brand new training class on de-escalation. Post recognized there were about 16 classes where we referred to de-escalation, but there's no actual class on de-escalation. So I worked with a group of people in 2018, 2019, and we built a 4-hour training curriculum that's now mandatory in the basic academy for the new recruits. And they attached it to the use of force curriculum. So even though I only primarily responsible for the portion on de-escalation, I sit through all the use of force training, and I monitor their communication skills, their request for resources, and try to get them focusing not just on force, but how do we prevent from getting to that point where we have to use force? What strategies and techniques is available to us so that we can be more effective and everybody goes home safe and gets the resources that they need. So we do an 8-hour refresher class. We started that in 2022. Post and I think CIT International both recognize it's a perishable skill. So we try to get, once officers have been out of the training for about 2 to 3 years, we get them back in for a refresher class. That's one that we're need to have some catch up done on. And the problem is like all agencies in California right now, it's been really tough to hire. So when we bring someone in for this refresher class on overtime, then that triggers them for backfilling someone else on the street. So although we are completing the classes and getting people through training, it's been tough for some of the smaller agencies that have less resources. We provide staff reports as requested for the agencies, and we create training curriculums, and we do quarterly briefing training for the Sheriff's Office and our partners. So we try to distribute at least something every quarter, a training bulletin, or we try to go in person in briefings. And that way they get familiar with our faces and we can answer questions about and try to discover any trends that are happening out there. One of the other things we do in collaborating with all of our partners, always make sure that if anybody has an issue with another resource or an agency, I broker a meeting. I'll say, okay, Oxnard Police, Behavioral Health Crisis Team, let's all have a sit down and meet. Because what I don't want is for us to be frustrated and trash talk each other behind our backs. So we get everyone in the room and we talk about what our current issues are. Because in most cases, it ends up being either a training issue or a communication issue. It doesn't come down to like somebody just not wanting to do their job. It's just communication or training. So we've had a lot of success with bringing everyone together and making sure that that happens. We do a lot of community presentations. So we do the outreach and we talk to communities about what we do, because we don't want the community to be surprised by, you know, the training that we do or the way that we're acting. So I take every request I get from a community group to come out and talk about our CIT program. And after 23 years, we still get people that have never heard of us, surprisingly. But and we always tell the people in the group to request a CIT trained officer whenever they're having a behavioral health emergency. And I think that's important because even though their odds are very high of getting a CIT trained officer, I think it changes the mindset of the dispatcher, and it also changes the mindset of the officer responding. So instead of now responding to a family disturbance, it's now a family disturbance where they've requested a CIT trained officer. And I think that changes the perspective of the people who are responding to that call. 2023, we started doing some training for our fire personnel. We were finding that the fire department hadn't adjusted to the changes that law enforcement made. Some of our old school firefighters were used to, they say, hey, officer or deputy, put that guy on the gurney, we need to take him to the hospital, and we would comply and do that. And that obviously led to problems, lawsuits, injuries, And so we've had to educate the fire department on the rules and restrictions that we have as law enforcement officers and what we can and can't do. And that's been actually pretty well received. So we brought in a lot of the fire captains and engineers and explained to them what we can and can't do. We provide case assistance. So when people call in, family members, they want to hear about resources and they want to talk about their family member, we refer them in the right direction. So although the main thing we do is our 40-hour training class, as you can probably have heard already, that's not all we do. There's a lot of things that we provide, but we can do up to 4 classes a year with our post-approval and up to 50 students per class. We have about 67% of our communication operators trained in the county, and about 92% of all patrol officers, who primarily only count patrol. We don't count detectives and command staff. And about 50% of our custody personnel have all been through the 40-hour training. And this is where we differ from CIT International, although we followed CIT International model for the training. Our law enforcement leaders about 10 years ago said, we want everybody trained. They recognize the value and the impact that it's had on our community. So even though, you know, you have people that are ordered to go to the training, I've always see even those people who get ordered to the training end up getting something out of it. The one story I always like to tell, at a sergeant that went to the training, he just got assigned to working with like a homeless liaison team, working with the homeless mentally ill. And he came up to us at the end of the training and said, you know, I've been avoiding this class for 15 years and it's the dumbest thing I ever did. He says, I learned so much this week, you know, resources and how to handle situations like this. Obviously left us with a really good feeling. So the goal ultimately is to train 100% of dispatchers and our sworn personnel that are on the street and in the custody environment. Dispatchers, it's always been 100% goal, but because they have a high turnover rate, it's hard to get them away for a 40-hour class. But we do also bring the communication operators in for the 8-hour update classes. So funding, I know that there was talk about funding earlier. How we do it is, since it's a multi-agency program, we decided based on population that community serves, they would pay that percentage of the program. And whenever possible, we utilize grant funding to help expand and sustain the program. But our largest funding source comes from our Ventura County Behavioral Health Department. We have a memorandum of understanding with them. They give us $250,000 each fiscal year. We just had it increase from 225 to 250 this year. And they also provide in-kind services by providing us instructors and role players and evaluators for our training. I try to use as few law enforcement officers as possible in our training because I want the officers and deputies to get the perspective of the mental health personnel. So, and per our MOU with the CIA, we agree to provide training for first responders and provide data on the related contacts. So again, we do presentations on how CIT program interacts with families and consumers, participate in community stakeholder events, and then we do the follow-ups of the families. So one of the things my co-worker in the unit, Aaron Kitzman, he had surgery earlier this week and wasn't able to be here for this presentation, but he'll go through all of our CIT referrals and he'll go through and anyone that needs to be referred to behavioral health, he'll do that referral. So it's preventing the people from falling through the cracks. And we also review if we get more than 3 contacts with a person in a month. Again, we'll contact the agency that's having those regular contacts and advise them what's a good direction to go, what might be a good resource for that person to be connected to. So because it's a multi-agency operation, one of the things that makes me and Aaron more effective is the coordinators. So every station that is part of our partnership, they have a coordinator. The coordinators are invited to all the quarterly meetings. And whenever we send out resources, we need to distribute information. They're our point of contact. They review CIT cards, which I'll go over in a minute. And they're like the champions for that program. I mentioned here on voice, they have a voice program. That's something we started 2 years ago. It's veteran outreach and crisis events. So we have 2 military bases here in Ventura County. They call it Naval Base Ventura County, but there's 2 facilities, a CV base and a naval base. But what we found is that connecting a veteran with a veteran in crisis is probably the best thing you can do. They speak the same language. They can connect better than a non-veteran. So we have officers that volunteered for this program. They get an extra 4 hours of training on top of the 40-hour CIT program. They wear a pin that recognizes them as a voice deputy. And so what we do is if we have a voice deputy that's on duty, we have them to respond to the call and then try to make that connection with the vet. All those contacts go through one sergeant here in the county. And within 2 weeks, we make sure that there's a follow-up phone call made to check in on that person to see if they were able to connect with services or if they need help connecting with services. Our coordinator also will point out somebody to be nominated for CIT Officer of the Year. So we do recognition for each station of the officer and deputy of the year from each location to help, helps keep people motivated and recognize them for the hard work that they're putting in and trying to get people connected with services. So there's our stakeholder meetings is kind of the main categories. This is just a sampling. We have a lot more agencies that go, both private, county, cities. So we bring in all of our stakeholders and meet every quarter, and along with our coordinators and the people running the CIT program. So we've held 62 academies since 2001. We've trained over 2,300 people since we started the program. Not all of them are still in law enforcement. Some have retired, some have passed away, gone to other agencies, but it's always been our goal. And as was mentioned earlier by one of your other presenters, it takes about 50 to 70 people to run a 40-hour class because of all the guest speakers, instructors, resources. And then on the final morning, Friday morning of when we're finishing the class, we have 4 role play scenarios where all the each scenario requires 2 evaluators, 2 actors. And so it's a lot going on. And the next slide, I know you're not going to be able to read that very well, but this is an example of what our schedule looks like. We just graduated a class last Friday on the 11th. And so you can see why it takes so many presenters and instructors plus our staff that's on site. But a couple things that we used to do when we first started, we went to facilities and did facility tours, but we're a smaller county and people weren't getting a lot out of that because they already knew where all the facilities were. So instead we changed Wednesday morning to force option scenario. So they get to do the simulator on Wednesday morning because the biggest request we had on our evaluations was we want more repetitions. We want more role play exercises. We want more chances to practice the skills that we're learning. So on Wednesday morning, we split the class into 4 groups. A quarter of the class is in FOSS, half the class is getting their training on psychosis, mood, and personality disorders. Another quarter of the class is working on a teach back presentation that they do on Thursday for the rest of the class. Well, you see we have de-escalation presentations 4 different times, and it's not the exact same curriculum each time. It's different aspects of de-escalation. You can see one's the basics that we do on Monday. Number 2 is on active listening. Number 3 is more scenario based because it's the FOSS. And then on Thursday afternoon, we do more with video type scenarios and breaking them down and getting people to understand different ways of handling things. And then we end it with we actually do a written exam at the end. So I mentioned earlier I was on the post project. So these next few slides, I'm gonna kind of give you some of the highlights of some of the things that are important in our training. But when we built this definition, it was very purposeful. De-escalation is the process of using strategies and techniques intended to decrease the intensity of a situation. We wanted to make sure that people recognize that de-escalation was not a magic word, like you just say de-escalate and people start to cooperate. It's the process of using strategies and techniques. So in the training, we teach them strategies and techniques and all with the goal of reducing the intensity of the situation. So one of the things I talk about is, and this is a pyramid, so you want to establish contact with a person, make sure that you have visual connection with them, build rapport, and then obtain influence. And the simplest example I could give is, hey, how you doing today? Mark Stadler, Ventura Police. How are you? Good. Can I have you step right over here, please? And if I introduce myself, work to build rapport, and I've obtained influence by getting them to step to a side or sit down, then I've accomplished my goal. If I get resistance from them, all that means is I need to continue to work on building rapport. I've just got more work to do. So one of the things we emphasize is, those are your psychology or sociology majors, probably remember this, Maslow's hierarchy of needs theory. Maslow said only unmet needs motivate. So tell them when they're confronting someone with, like homeless, mentally ill, when somebody says, hey, bum, get a job, that means nothing to them. I mean, they're still trying to figure out where to get food, water, sleep. And we tell them to ask them when's the last time they ate? What did they eat? When's the last time they had something to drink, and what was it? How long did you sleep last night? Where did you sleep? All those things are important things to determine what might be the underlying cause for the behavior. And also, when you're asking those questions, you're also showing that person that you care about them as an individual, and you're not just going there saying, hey, we got a call that you're hanging out in the park. So instead of taking that approach, go from an approach where you're trying to figure out how to meet the needs that they have not met. So we also emphasize the importance of self-control. And you have to understand that fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. I remind them that when you confront somebody in a mental health crisis, they're going to be acting in one of these ways: fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. It's, they're using the amygdala, the lizard brain. They're no longer using logical thought. They're in protection mode. And I remind them that they too, under stress, are going to react in one of these 4 ways. And that's one of the reasons why you have police academies that put you under stress. It's why military goes into a boot camp and they put you under stress. And it's not necessarily bad to react in any one of these 4 ways, but you need to learn under stress how to work through it, how to stay in the game and be able to continue to function. So when you're dealing with someone in a mental health crisis or behavioral health crisis, you need to realize that time and distance are your friends. They can slow things down, get the person through the crisis, and get them to the point where they make the decision on their own, and not where we have to use force and make them comply. So we talk about personal safety. We always remind them that nothing that we teach should jeopardize our officer safety. And we tell them, if you hear anything that we teach that you think jeopardize your safety, please speak up and let us know, and we'll talk about it. We teach them about using proper positioning, looking for weapons. And then LEAPS is a communication model. It's listen. And we teach them to, first thing you always want to do is listen. And then the E is for empathy. You want to use empathy when you're talking to someone. Show an empathetic face. Show that you're listening. Show that you care about what they're saying. And then after listening and showing empathy, then you ask your questions. And then after asking your questions, you paraphrase. So essentially, you don't parrot back what they said, but you repeat back to them in your words what you believe them to say. And then you can get confirmation on that you understood them. And then finally, you want to summarize, wrap it all up, and talk about steps moving forward. Another big concept is the TACT model: tone, atmosphere, communication, and time. So that reminds you to use a calm, reassuring tone when you're talking to someone. Think about the atmosphere. Are there things in the environment that are stressors? Is it family members? Is it your police radio? Is it the lights, sirens? If you can do anything to control the atmosphere to help reduce the intensity of situation, that's great. And then communication, touched on it a little bit with LEAPS, and then time. Sometimes we artificially create exigency, which causes us to make poor decisions at times. So I always remind them, whatever you can, slow things down. Law enforcement kind of has a reputation of speed. you know, we've got all these calls on the board, we gotta hurry up and handle them and move on. When what we really need to do is slow things down, keep a safe space between you and the person in crisis, and give them a chance to make that decision on their own, that it's time to cooperate. And we talk about less lethal weapons, you know, whenever it's available, it should be part of your plan on when you're having a crisis intervention. And you have to be prepared for it to work and prepared for it to be ineffective. Less lethal weapons only work about 70% of the time. So it's always best to make sure that you have a partner officer with you before you attempt to use a less lethal weapon, and be prepared for it to work or not work. So upon completion of the training, we want them to be able to understand signs and symptoms of mental illnesses, intellectual developmental disabilities, and co-occurring disorders. Recognize when those signs and symptoms represent a crisis. Learn the de-escalation strategies and techniques. Utilize community resources and use diversion strategies available to provide emergency assistance. And this is, I referenced earlier, CIT cards. We've been using these for quite a while now. On the upper right of the screen is the hard copy version of the card. And then on the lower left is an app the Sheriff's Office created called ICOP. It's actually a really good app, but unfortunately it's being phased out for a new computer system that's coming in. But the great thing about ICOP is that an officer or deputy in the field can immediately enter information about a person, and it goes in the system right away. So if someone gets contacted in the morning in Ventura, and then by the afternoon they're in Oxnard, the officer can look on the app and know that that person was just contacted a few hours earlier. The other thing that's different about the CIT card as opposed to a regular field contact card is we ask them emergency contact information, which is great to have at 3 in the morning when someone's in a crisis. We ask them, was there any thing that you did that triggered them? And was there anything that you did that allowed them to reduce the intensity to de-escalate? I want them to document all those things so we have that information when the person's in a crisis. It also allows us to, I mentioned when we have 3 contacts in a month, so the cards they're mandatory with most departments, but still we have issue with compliance at times because it's one more piece of paper for the officer to fill out. But when we do get good compliance, we're able to identify people who are contacted repeatedly and try to refer them to get the assistance that they need. So we surveyed our officers before and after the training. And so we had 100% of them said they benefited from the training, and 50% said very much. 30% said they use their new skills often, and 95% felt they could better recognize a mental health disorder, and 92% felt better able to handle a call involving someone in a mental health crisis. So the benefits of CIT, you know, it's immediate response. That's one of the things that, you know, law enforcement is on the street 24/7, and also law enforcement are the only ones that are trained to go hands-on. So although it's not always ideal to have a law enforcement officer handling a mental health crisis, the reality is that when they're in crisis, we're the only ones trained to go hands-on. So we want to increase citizen officer safety, reduce citizen officer injuries, increase jail diversion, increase officers' confidence, reduce liability, reduce unnecessary arrests, avoidance of costs of the system, and linkages of long-term services, promoting recovery. So about 88% of the contacts result in a verbalization only. There's no contact at all with the person. CIT officers are less likely to use force, and they're 3 times more likely to have a contact only and 2 times less likely to use jail. And they handle the calls faster. For a short time, several years ago, we actually did some tracking, and because the original theory was that, wow, you know, this is going to take forever. The officers are going to be talking to people all the time, and the calls aren't going to get handled. But we found that the CIT trained officer handled a call in 63 minutes, and a non-CIT trained officer handled it in 92. And what we figured is that the CIT trained officer recognized what the issue was faster, and they knew what resources were available. So they actually became more effective by completing the CIT training. So consumer and family feedback, 90% believe that the CIT trained officer was able to recognize the mental health disorder, and 90% believe the CIT officer was able to de-escalate the crisis in a satisfactory manner. So we have a program, and it actually started with a state triage grant a few years ago. It's called Rapid Integrated Support and Engagement. So it's a behavioral health team. They go out, and when we have somebody that is making contact with over and over again, the people from the RISE program can go out and initiate contact and offer that person services. The person tells them to go away, I don't want any help. They'll come back in a few more days and check in with them again, and until they try to talk to them and build that trust and try to connect them with services. And after we started that program, we've partnered RISE workers with officers from Ventura, Oxnard, Simi, and sheriffs in some of their contract cities. So it's become a real good, successful partnership, working with an officer and someone from the RISE team to get people connected. That's the contact information if anybody wants more information about the RISE program. I put in this slide because people always ask the question, well, what would you, in a perfect world, what would you do? I think if we could get a no wrong door policing and collaboration, the issue we have now in our county is we don't have anywhere we can direct admit anyone who's in a mental health crisis. We have to go to our nearest emergency department. And that's been going on for about 8 years now. So the person sits in the emergency department waiting for us to find a bed for them. And we're kind of unique in our county right now. We had a private hospital in this area that's lost their LPS status. So they're no longer able to take involuntary patients. They're still taking voluntary, and they're still doing outpatient services. But so it's created a problem for us locally with beds. So yeah, in a perfect world, if we had more locations we could take people to, that they can start getting help immediately and not sitting in an emergency department waiting for bed. And so closing thoughts I always share with my classes. I talk to them about euphemistic labeling. I tell them if you catch yourself or the people around you using labeling, you gotta check yourself, because throughout the history of humankind, when have we been able to treat other human beings poorly? We put a label on them. We class them as less than us, different than us. Then we feel better about not treating them the way they should be treated. Make a good movie. That's just a reminder about remind your own body camera, and call for the resources you need. Use the appropriate behavior. Use different strategies and techniques that you learn. And the golden rule: treat others as the way you'd want to be treated. Show respect for human life and dignity. Always remember that de-escalation requires cooperation, because you could say everything right, do everything right, but that person has a right to self-determine. And if they want to attempt to fight you, if they want to take their own life, all you can do is just the best you can to keep them safe and offer them alternatives. But ultimately, like I said, they decide what happens. And never risk your life or safety for someone that's suicidal. I say that because the officer, deputy, you need to go home at night safely. A lot of us got into this job because it's a helping profession. We want to help people. And if you ultimately decide to take a serious risk to save somebody, then that's your decision. But sometimes we get caught up in our moral obligations over our legal obligations. And I think your primary obligation is to keep yourself safe for you, your department, your family, and then take care of the person that's in the mental health crisis. There's the contact information. I know I might have buzzed through that a little quick, but I didn't want to hang up too much on the stuff you'd already covered earlier, and I wanted to allow plenty of time for questions.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions from the council? Don't see any hands. Oh, yes. Councilmember Burt, thank you.
I got to ask at least one question, right? So Mark, thank you for your many years of service. Great presentation. I'm going to ask you a CIT question because you were definitely one of the experts. Do all CIT classes require some sort of presentation on autism and IDD, or is that up to the CIT instructors? I was just looking through the very long list of the post classes, and I see a lot of CIT mention specifically autism and IDD, and some of them don't. And I didn't know if that was just naturally embedded, or is it up to the instructor?
Best practices say yes, that should be included. And one thing I probably didn't emphasize is that what's great now about what we have going on, so I get to have the new recruits in the academy for LD 37, where they get 15 hours of training, and which does cover developmental disabilities, intellectual disabilities. Then right after graduation in our county, they graduate on Friday, and then on Monday they come to my CIT training. So where they get another 40 hours of training, because some of those deputies are going to the jail, the officers are going straight to the street. So the theory in the past with CIT International is that you want to get the officers a little bit of experience before they go through the training. And I understand that, but it's also for our county, this works best. And on one hand, we're filling every single class because we get the officers that are graduated from the basic academy, plus we're filling in people who haven't been through the training yet. So we're getting good compliance, and we're building our numbers, and we're getting people through the training that need to be there. It used to be our jail was only about 20% of the people were trained, but now that they're going through the training and into the jail, our numbers are going way up, and some of them are being assigned to the mental health units inside the jail. So clearly they need that additional training. And since we do the 2-hour update classes, I think that's not 2 hour, the 8-hour update classes every 2 to 3 years. So even if they go to the jail for 3 years, right about the time they're going to go back to patrol, they're going to go through the 8-hour update class. Plus we send out, like I said, on a quarterly basis, additional information on, changes in laws, changes in forms to keep them up to date.
So they have, you said basically 8 hours in the academy, another.
Well, the LD 37 is LD 37 is a 15-hour class, but it includes everything like, vision and hearing impairment and mental health and developmental disabilities. That's a 15-hour block. It includes the 5150 training. And then they go through really an expanded version of that when they go through the 40-hour class.
And the 40 hours.
Yeah.
Okay.
Plus they get to do the role plays and interaction, and I think which really hammers it in. When the recruits are in the academy, and I know it was a long time ago for me, but you're being fed with a fire hose when you're going through the academy. You're worried about getting yelled at, having to do push-ups, and you're trying to store things in your short-term memory and then get it on paper and pass the test. But we try to keep more of a relaxed environment. They've graduated now, and sometimes I joke, I'm like, so for 6 months they get yelled at and learn how to give command presence. And then the next week I got to teach them how to be human again.
Right. No, that's great. Thank you so much. I appreciate the presentation and again, your service.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I was that clear, huh?
You have an amazing story, and your personal touch to all of this it really adds another layer to it, and that I appreciate as a parent of a child that is nonverbal and a runner and all of these things. Your four F's is things that I tell people all the time that my son will have. So just knowing.
I
Go ahead. Sorry.
forgot to mention one of my layers. I'm also, I have a 32-year-old daughter. She had cerebral palsy since birth, quadriplegic, nonverbal. So it's like having a 95-pound baby, but she keeps me and my wife grounded. you know, we have to be home by 8:30 every night when the nurse is off, and so she keeps us out of trouble in some ways. But she'll live with us forever.
Share.
So I bring that perspective to the job also.
I love that. I love that. And you actually answered in some of your final comments. One of my questions I like to try to ask is, what are your needs, right? What do you think is lacking? And you mentioned the actually what the last presentation was more beds, more places to take folks when they need to go somewhere.
Yeah,
Right.
that's huge, because the sad thing is we've actually, on occasion, we'll have someone we take emergency department, they'll sit there for 72 hours. And then we can't keep them there any longer unless they stay voluntarily. So that application for the hold has run out. It's from the time we detain them till 72 hours later. And they're not getting mental health treatment. They're just sitting in an emergency department waiting for placement. And that's one of the saddest things that happen. And you can't just write another application for hold. You have to have new facts and information to write an additional hold.
Trying to think if there's any other questions I can think of. If there is one, I got your contact information.
Okay.
Any questions from anybody else on the council? None. I will thank you very much for your time and your commitment to this. And look forward to maybe hearing more from you in the future.
Great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.
Righty. That puts us right at the end of the meeting, pretty much, right, Marissa?
That is correct. I did want to know, I see that there's a member of the public with their hand raised in the chat. To that end, as we've now passed public comment, I would invite that individual and honestly anybody else in the public who is at all interested in providing any information to us or any opinions or any comments or questions, to please email us at sb882@doj.ca.gov. Again, sb882@doj.ca.gov. And we're happy to, take any public comments that you may have. And we do ask too that for folks in the audience who would like to provide a public comment, it is very helpful to us as well when you email us to let us know in that email if that is your intention to provide a public comment, or if you just, happen to have a question about the way the meeting is running or something like that. So I did just want to flag that before we close out the meeting today. Thank you.
Well, we handled item number 17 earlier. We're a little ahead of schedule here, which I'm sure will make everybody's day a little bit better. And that takes us to the closing remarks by the chair or interim chair for now. And I will just say, it's a lot of information to take in one day. So I encourage folks to go back, dig into these, do some of their own research, reach out to staff, reach out to these presenters for questions. We still got a lot of work to do. And as I think, as we were talking about for future meetings, kind of conquering and dividing to get some of these trainings observed, and then hearing from other community organizations what they have or what they want to see or how they collaborate with law enforcement is another piece we want to hear from. There's a lot of things for us to do in the coming months, and I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to strapping my boots on and doing what we got to get done to just make our recommendations that much stronger. So thank you guys for your time and commitment today, our council members, our staff, and the community that joined us. And with that, I will entertain a meeting motion to adjourn. That's how I know we normally run a meeting, but yeah. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
There we go.
I will second.
All right. Madam Parliamentarian,
Yes.
if you'll take the roll for the adjournment of the meeting, or if we don't need to in this circumstance, I know in labor, that's how we do it, so.
Yes, I'll take the roll. Okay, the motion before you is to adjourn the meeting. There was a second, and I'll take the roll beginning with Vice Chair Zuniga.
Aye.
Vice Chair Zuniga votes aye. Member Brown?
Aye.
Member Brown votes aye. Member Burt?
Aye.
Member Burt votes aye. Member Libero?
Aye.
Member Libero votes aye. Member, Petarudu?
Aye.
Member Petarudu votes aye. Member Phillips?
Aye.
Member Phillips votes aye. Member Tingley?
Aye.
Member Tingley votes aye. Madam Vice Chair, there were 7 members present and voting. There were 7 ayes, 0 nays, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you, Madam Parliamentarian, and then we stand in adjournment at 3:32. And thank you all very much. And I'm sure Marissa will be, and Juliana and Ben and everybody will be in contact with us in the coming weeks.
Of course. Thank you.
Thank you guys. Have a good day. Great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Nice to meet everyone. Looking forward to working with you.
Yeah.